Magna's Story Sound presents an unabridged recording of Pastures New, written by Margaret Thornton, read by Maggie Mash. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Magna, Gargrave BD 23 3SE. CD 1. Chapter 1. What did I tell you? I knew they would rue the day they adopted that child, but would they listen? Oh no. Mind you, I think it was Valerie that was keen on the idea, and Samuel just went along with it. Beatrice Walker was in high dudgeon, but her husband Joshua was used to her ways, knowing she was always determined to be proved right. "Leave it alone, Beatrice," he replied. "I don't suppose the little lad is worse than any other child of his age. Damn it all, he's only just 2 years old. He's got plenty of time to improve. He's just a bit jealous-like, with the new baby coming along. Thinks his nose is being pushed out. It's only natural." "Yes, and that's another thing." Beatrice would not be stopped. They didn't need to have adopted a child so soon. They'd only been married 2 years, no time at all. But Valerie was so determined to go ahead with it. She'd had a miscarriage and 1 or 2 disappointments, though, hadn't she? "Yes, I know that, but no sooner had they adopted the child, she finds she's pregnant again." Well, she wasn't to know that, was she? "I've heard. That often happens, and we were delighted about it, especially when she came through it all right this time, and she's a jolly good mother to both of them. You know that, Beatty." Beatrice bridled, as she always did when her husband used the name she had tried so hard to forget, the name she had been called when she was a girl. She had been known as Beatty Halliwell before she had married Joshua Walker, the mill owner's son, and taken a step up the social ladder. She had been an employee at a rival mill at the other side of town, but had tried to forget her humble beginnings. "I know she's a good mother, Joshua," she replied. "I've become fond of Valerie. She's a good wife to our Samuel as well." Beatrice had objected strongly at first, when their younger son Samuel, usually known as Sam, had told them that he intended to marry a young woman called Valerie Horrocks, who was employed in the mill office. Sam's brother Jonathan had shown his displeasure too, but he had changed his opinion since then, and now agreed that Val was a most suitable wife for Sam. Beatrice also had been forced to eat her words, when she was reminded that she too had married a mill owner's son and gone up in the world. This conversation was taking place one evening in the September of 1960, at the home of Joshua and Beatrice in Queensbury, the rather select residential area of Halifax, at the top of the hill which rose from the town at the bottom of the valley. It was a substantial, detached, grey-stone house in its own grounds, and had been the home of the mill owners for 3 generations. When his father Jacob had retired, Joshua had taken over as the mill's manager, and had gone to live at the family home. His parents, now in their late 80s, lived nearby, as did their 2 sons, Jonathan and Samuel, with their wives and children. During the spring of the previous year, Val and Sam had adopted a little boy, Russell James, then 7 months old. He was a local child, who had been tragically orphaned when his young parents, only recently married, had been killed in a car crash. The people of the town had been saddened by the tragedy, none more so than Val, who had persuaded Sam that this was an ideal opportunity for them. In the end, he had not needed much convincing, as the child's great-grandfather, Charlie Pearson, was a valued employee at Walker's Mill, having worked in the packing department ever since he was a lad. Charlie was now retired, and he and his wife Alice had been delighted at the turn of events. They were still in touch with their great-grandchild, as Sam and Val took the little boy to see them regularly. This compensated, to a great degree, for the loss of their beloved granddaughter and her parents, who had emigrated to Canada some years previously. And then, in the autumn of 1959, when Russell was 1 year old, Val had discovered that she was pregnant again. She had believed that she would never be able to carry a child to full term, but this time she had done so. Their baby daughter, Lucy Elizabeth, had been born on the 1st day of June, 1960, a most welcome addition to the family. The child's christening, a private baptism service at the local church, had taken place the previous Sunday. Beatrice had been shocked at the behaviour of Russell during the service, and afterwards at the little party held at the home of Sam and Val.
"Our little Rosemary behaved beautifully," said Beatrice. "I was so proud of her."
Rosemary was the daughter, the only child so far, of Jonathan and his wife Thelma.
"She is 4 years old," said Joshua, "and she's learnt that there are times when you have to be quiet. It's done her a world of good going to that playgroup. You can't compare her with a 2-year-old. They're into everything then. Our Jonathan and Samuel were a handful at that age, if I remember rightly."
"Then I don't think you remember rightly at all," retorted his wife. "They were very well-behaved little boys. I could take them anywhere. People used to say how good they were and what a credit to us."
"Aye, maybe so. I'll grant that they behaved themselves pretty well when we took them places. But they could be little tearaways at home, both of them. And Jonathan used to egg Samuel on. I remember them pulling up the flowers in the garden, saying they were helping Albert with the weeding. And you must recall the time they got into your makeup drawer. What a mess."
"Mischievous, that's all," countered Beatrice. "They grew out of it."
"And so will Russell. He'll settle down and get used to baby Lucy being around. He had their undivided attention until the new baby arrived, and they probably made even more of him because he was adopted, to make sure he knew that he was loved and wanted."
"And what will happen when he finds out he's not their child? Not their birth child, I mean. Isn't that what they call it? I know they refer to birth mothers nowadays, and there's a school of thought that believes you should tell the child the truth. Tell him that he was a special baby because he was chosen by them. How would he react to that?"
Joshua sighed. "Goodness me, Beatrice, I don't know. It's up to them, isn't it, what they decide to tell him? Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. They will have to sort something out, because Charlie Pearson and his wife are taking an interest in the little lad. Only natural they should."
"Maybe so, but it's a complication we could do without, if you ask me."
Joshua longed to tell her that nobody was asking her, but he held his tongue. "I admit he's a lively lad," he said. "But I dare say that other little lad that was there, Walter's kiddie, Paul, was a handful when he was that age. I remember Walter saying so, but he's 4 now and he behaved very well at the christening, and so did the other children."
"Yes, I forget who they all are," said Beatrice. "So many children all over the place."
"You know very well who they are," said Joshua. "Walter and Sissy have 2 children, Paul and Holly. Holly is nearly 3. A bonny little lass, the image of her mother. Sissy used to work at our place, you know."
"Yes, I've heard you say. She worked in the birling and mending room," said Beatrice dismissively. "Rather common sort of girl, I thought. I'm surprised that she and Valerie are such good friends. Chalk and cheese, aren't they?
Maybe so. I know Sissy isn't as ladylike as her friend, but she's a grand lass, and her heart's in the right place. The two girls have been friendly since they started school together when they were 4 years old. It's a long time. That's why Val asked her to be godmother to Russell, and to Lucy as well. And Walter is godfather to Russell. You remember that?
Yes, Walter Clarkson. He's one of your protégés, isn't he?
He's a good worker. Been with us since he left school. Apart from his national service, of course. He's in charge of the weaving sheds now, a very responsible young man. And the other little girl belongs to Janice and Phil, the couple from Harrogate. Sarah, they call her. Val says she's just 1 year old. Nice little lass. Val and Sissy are her godmothers.
Janice. She's the girl from Blackpool, isn't she?
Yes, she's from Blackpool, but she and Phil have a restaurant in Harrogate now. Grundy's, they call it. That's their surname, and it's nice and easy to remember. I believe they're doing very well. Perhaps we could go over and have a meal there sometime.
Maybe we could.
But Beatrice did not sound too enthusiastic.
I must admit that Janice seems a very pleasant girl, friendly in a quiet sort of way, not as loud and raucous as that other one, that Sissy.
Well, it takes all sorts, replied Joshua, and the three lasses are good friends, despite their different backgrounds or whatever. They've got more friendly since Janice moved to Yorkshire, of course. That's a holiday friendship that has lasted.
And it's not the only one either, said Beatrice feelingly. I must admit, though, Joshua, that it's turned out all right with our Samuel and Valerie. Much better than I expected. It's a good thing it was Valerie he fell for and not the other one, Sissy.
Joshua laughed. You're right there. I don't know how I'd fancy Sissy as a daughter-in-law. Secretly, though, he liked Sissy. She reminded him of Marilyn Monroe, with her mass of blonde hair, big blue eyes, and frivolity. He agreed, though, that his son had made the right choice with Valerie. Samuel's got good taste, he added, and it'll work out all right with little Russell and all. Sam and Val are good parents. He remembered only too well what Beatrice was referring to. It had been in the August of 1955, when Walker's Mill closed for a week's annual holiday, that the two girls, Val and Sissy, had gone to Blackpool, staying at the boarding house, more of a private hotel by that time, run by Janice's mother. Sam had also gone to Blackpool with two friends for a golfing holiday, although they had sampled the attractions that the resort had to offer as well. Sam and Val had met at the Winter Gardens ballroom, when he had asked her for a dance. He had not recognized her as an office girl from Walker's Mill, but she had known him at once. She had told him that she was one of their employees, but it had made no difference. The two young people were immediately attracted to one another, and Sam had known that this was the girl he wanted to marry. There had been opposition, as he had expected, from his mother and his brother, but he had stood firm, and they had married in the spring of 1957. And Valerie Horrocks, after a frosty reception from some members, had been accepted wholeheartedly into the Walker family. In their semi-detached home, a half-mile or so from his parents' home, Sam and Val were also talking about Russell's behaviour, not only at the christening, but the way he was behaving most of the time, especially since the arrival of baby Lucy 3 months ago. Both children were in bed now at 7 o'clock, Fortunately, Russell usually settled down to sleep when he had had his drink of milk and a biscuit and a bedtime story. By that time, of course, Lucy had been bathed and settled in her cot, and he had his parents' undivided attention, which was what he wanted and expected at other times as well. It was the Wednesday evening following the christening, and he had been particularly troublesome that day, when Val had taken the two of them to the local shops.
"He hates having his reins on," said Val. "And I don't like it much either. He pulls like mad, and I feel as though I'm taking a puppy for a walk. But he won't hang on to the handle of the pram. He just goes tearing off ahead, and I can't let him do that, especially near the main road. And he's a nuisance in the shops. I feel embarrassed when I have to keep telling him not to touch the fruit or the sweets and not to race around. I can see people looking at him and thinking, what a badly behaved child. I have to let go of his reins in the shop, and no way could I leave him with the pram while I go inside. I hardly ever take my eyes off the pram, of course. I see ladies peering in and smiling at Lucy. You never know, do you? You hear of babies being kidnapped, but there's nothing else I can do while she's so small."
"You worry too much, darling," said Sam. "Drink your sherry and try to relax." The two of them were enjoying a few moments' peace and quiet before they started their evening meal. It was a hectic time between 5:30 and 7, Russell's tea time, then Lucy's feed and bath, then bedtime for the two of them. Sam shared the chores with his wife, knowing that she was not finding it easy with the two small children. "I know you take very good care of Lucy," he went on to say, "but I think you're getting far too worked up about Russell. He's only just 2. Haven't you heard parents talk about the terrible 2s? I remember you told me that Sissy's little boy went through that stage, didn't he?"
"For a time, maybe. But he never seemed jealous of little Holly. You should see Russell's face when ladies look in the pram and say what a lovely baby Lucy is. He scowls and jumps up and down and starts jiggling the pram."
"But it's rather foolish of people to admire the baby and ignore the little boy, isn't it? They should have more sense."
"I don't suppose it occurs to them. I don't know, Sam."
Val shook her head in bewilderment.
"Sissy seems to be making a much better job of motherhood than I am. And to think what she was like before. A real flibbity-gibbet. That's what my mother used to say. But look how she's settled down to it."
"Nonsense. You're doing splendidly," said Sam. "You must try not to get so upset."
Val sighed. "I suppose so. Anyway, let's have our tea, shall we?"
She still called the evening meal tea, as they had done at her home, even though it was always a cooked meal of some sort. Sam took sandwiches to work for his midday snack, while Val made do with a sandwich or a quick toastie. That evening, it was a chicken casserole with mashed potato and carrots, the sort of meal that could be left in the oven to cook slowly once it was prepared. Apple tart was to follow, with fresh cream. Val admitted that the tart had been bought from a local bakery. "I wouldn't expect anything else," Sam told her. "Goodness me, I don't expect you to bake as well as looking after these two. They're a full-time job." He tried to assure her again how well she was coping, while they enjoyed the meal.
"He was dreadful in church, though," she said, harking back to the christening again. "Shouting and running up and down the aisle. Then I think the penny dropped somehow. You managed to restrain him, and he seemed to realise that he had to be quiet. It might have been the way your mother glared at him. I could see she was horrified. And our little Rosemary was so good," she said afterwards. "I suppose we'll never hear the last of it. And Paul seemed to know how to behave as well."
"They're 2 years older. It makes a lot of difference. They both go to Sunday school, don't they? And to a playgroup. They'll be starting school soon. Children seem to start long before they're 5.
Goodness, how time flies. It doesn't seem long since Paul and Rosemary were born. Heaven help the teachers when Russell starts school, if he doesn't calm down.
Don't be silly, love. It's ages off yet. But maybe. Do you think he could go to a playgroup soon? Perhaps early next year? They take them at about 2.5, don't they?
They like them to be toilet trained, said Val. And thank goodness he's doing very well in that respect. He seems to know what's expected of him. That's one blessing, I suppose. Lucy gets through a mountain of nappies. I must say that Bendix washer is a godsend.
And you're happier now she's having a bottle, aren't you? Said Sam.
Yes, I have to confess I am. I know some women love breastfeeding. Sissy did. But I found it rather messy. I never felt clean. Anyway, I had no choice when my milk dried up.
And now I can help with feeding times, said Sam with a chuckle.
I'm very pleased that you're willing to do that. I really mean it, Sam. A lot of men think it's nothing to do with them, that it's the woman's job. But times seem to be changing, gradually.
Yes, I don't think my father helped very much with us, said Sam.
No, nor did mine, agreed Val. And my mum went out to work, only part-time, mind, when we were all at school. She never expected my dad to do anything in the house.
Both Val's parents had been employed at Walker's Mill. Bert still worked there in the packing department, although Sally Horrocks had finished long ago. Beatrice Walker, of course, had never gone out to work since she married the boss, and she had a woman to help with the running of the house as well.
Anyway, it's my job to wash up now, said Val, starting to clear the table. You go and read the paper, and I'll soon get rid of this lot.
Val was thoughtful as she squeezed the washing-up liquid into the bowl and started to tackle the plates. What a typically married couple we've become, she thought. Their recent conversation had been all about the children, mainly Russell's bad behaviour, nappies and washing machines, playgroups and children starting school. What a difference a couple of years had made. They had been married for 3 years now, almost 3.5 to be exact. The first year had been a carefree and blissful time, as they'd learnt more about each other. A time for entertaining friends and family members in their new home, making improvements to the house and garden, enjoying holidays together, and especially for Val, her first trip abroad, to Paris. It was during their second year of marriage that Val, more particularly so than Sam, had started to feel that it would be lovely to have a child to make their married happiness complete. For a while, it had seemed that this was not to be. Disappointments month after month, and then a miscarriage at 6 months, had made her feel depressed and inadequate. Returning to her job in the mill office, however, had done her a world of good. She had been feeling quite contented with her lot and resigned to letting things take their natural course. And then everything had changed dramatically. It had seemed so right, an answer to their hopes and prayers, to adopt the baby who had been so tragically orphaned. And now, a little more than a year later, they had not 1, but 2 children, a boy and a girl, which many couples would regard as the ideal family. But it had all happened so quickly that sometimes Val could hardly believe what had taken place. It had all started off so well with Russell. She had felt so proud pushing the pram around the neighbourhood, an elegant Silver Cross pram, a gift from Sam's parents, and stopping to chat to passers-by who admired the bonny baby boy, 7 months old at the time of his adoption. He had settled down so well with the 2 of them, and he had already had a routine of feeding and sleeping. Val had missed the early months, of course, a time when the child is so dependent on his mother for everything, and when mother and baby form a bond, although it was said that this did not always happen. Val did feel, though, that she had formed a kinship with little Russell. His eyes would light up with recognition when he saw her, and it was the same with Sam as well. He smiled and gurgled, cut his baby teeth with the minimum of trouble, and caused them very few sleepless nights. Then there was the shock, albeit a pleasant one, of finding she was pregnant again. She had been worried at first that she might lose the baby, but all had gone well, despite her having to cope with an active little boy who was starting to walk at just over a year and to talk as well, or at least attempt to do so. He could certainly make himself understood now. One of the first words he had learnt to say was no, but she gathered from talking to other mothers that this was not unusual. There came a time when a child changed from being dependent and obedient to willful and difficult, realizing that he or she was a person in his or her own right, with ideas of his or her own, which did not always agree with those of Mummy and Daddy. Then baby Lucy had arrived, 3 months before Russell's 2nd birthday. Val had been forewarned about the possible resentment and jealousy of an older child, and she had done her best to make sure that Russell was given as much love and attention as the new arrival. Unavoidably, though, much of her time was spent caring for the baby, breastfeeding at first, comforting her when she cried, and making sure that she was always warm, dry, and comfortable. Val had formed a bond with the baby girl at once. It had seemed like a miracle that she and Sam had produced their own child. She was an adorable little girl with dark hair, quite a lot of it, like her mother's. And even at a few weeks old, she had a definite resemblance to both of them. It was inevitable that Val's family members said, "She is just like you, Val," whereas Sam's family, especially his mother, proclaimed that she was a real walker. Val loved her more than she had imagined she could love anyone. A different sort of love, though, from the love she felt for her husband or her parents. She loved Russell too, of course she did. She wondered now, though, if those first few months made a vital difference. Was it possible to love an adopted child as much as a child who was one's own flesh and blood? It was a question she asked only of herself, and not without a feeling of guilt. Until the arrival of Lucy, she would have said that she loved Russell just as much as she would her own child. But now she was not sure. She became exasperated and worried when he defied her, quite blatantly sometimes, with a calculating look on his little face, as if daring her to chastise him. She felt at times that she almost disliked him, as well as feeling that she had no idea how to cope with him. She would never smack him, she knew that was not the answer. But cross words, or even kind words, seemed to make no difference. She remembered how Sam's mother had objected to the adoption, pointing out that the child's background was far from desirable. The father had been estranged from his own parents and had married the mother only a few months before the child was born, a wild, irresponsible young fellow, according to some who knew him, although the child did seem to have been well cared for during his first few months of life. Val and Sam had argued that this would make no difference, that their nurture of the child would counteract that of nature and any undesirable traits that he might inherit. But Val, to her consternation, was now wondering if there might be some truth in what Beatrice had said. Was Russell already showing signs of the wildness and willfulness that had been evident in his natural father? Or was he just a mischievous, determined little 2-year-old, like many his age? Val sighed as she dried the pots and put them away. Time would tell, and in the meantime, she must do her utmost to love and care for him as much as she cared for Lucy.
Chapter 2. In the living room above the cafe premises, Phil and Janice Grundy were talking about the christening of Lucy Elizabeth Walker, which they had attended the previous day. It had come as a pleasant surprise when Val and Sam had asked them both to be godparents to their baby girl. Val and her friend Cissy had been godmothers to Janice and Phil's little girl, Sarah Lillian, so it had not been too much of a surprise for Janice to be asked, but it was nice that Phil also had been invited to be her godfather.
"I was quite taken aback to be asked, but delighted, of course," he remarked. "It's great how our friendship with Val and Sam has continued. It was certainly an eventful meeting, that night in the Winter Gardens."
It was in the August of 1955, when they had all met in the ballroom of the Winter Gardens in Blackpool. Val and Cissy had been staying at the Floribunda Hotel at the northern end of the town, and they had invited Janice, who, as the landlady's daughter, was helping out as a waitress, to go dancing with them. Val and Sam had become acquainted for the first time that night, although she had known him already as the boss's son. Phil and Janice also had met when he'd asked her to dance with him. Phil had been in the RAF at the time, nearing the end of his national service, stationed at Wheaton Camp, a few miles from Blackpool. If not exactly love at first sight, there had been an immediate attraction between the two of them. Their friendship had developed gradually into the certainty that they wanted to be together for always, and they had married in the spring of 1958.
"And now, here we are," Phil went on, "old married couples with families. Cissy and Walter as well. We mustn't forget them. Just imagine that. Who'd have thought it?"
Cissy, to her annoyance, had not met anyone special that evening, and had returned home to Halifax to marry her boyfriend Walter Clarkson, with whom she had been having an on-off friendship for a few years.
"Val has certainly got her hands full with those two," said Janice. "The last time we saw little Russell, he seemed to be quite well behaved. I do hope he'll settle down again. She looked so embarrassed when he wouldn't keep quiet. Then Sam managed to restrain him by holding him firmly. He was wriggling like an eel, though. And the other children were so good, Cissy and Walter's too, and Rosemary and our little Sarah."
"Don't speak too soon," said Phil with a chuckle. "You never know what's ahead. A few months makes a big difference, and the last time we saw Russell, it was before the baby was born. A touch of jealousy, I suppose, especially as there's less than 2 years between them."
"Yes, Val had given up hope of them having their own child. They hadn't been married all that long, but she'd been disappointed so many times. It happened so soon, though, just as they were getting used to having Russell. I certainly wouldn't want another baby, not just yet."
"Message received and understood," said Phil with a grin. "You're doing really well, though, love, looking after Sarah and running the cafe as well.
Not without help. Marjorie's a real treasure. I couldn't manage without her, and we've been very lucky with the waitresses. And Toby's an excellent chef, isn't he?"
Phil agreed that they had been very fortunate with their staff. They had all worked together as a team, and Grundy's had become a popular venue for local people and visitors to the town of Harrogate since the opening 2 years previously. When they had met in the summer of 1955, Janice and Phil had discovered that they had similar backgrounds, and this, as much as anything, had helped to cement their growing friendship. Janice had been working as a waitress in the hotel run by her mother, Lillian Butler, marking time until starting her university course in September. Phil, about to complete his national service, was to return to Ilkley to help his father run the Coach and Horses, a country pub and restaurant, once a coaching inn. His 2 years in the RAF had interrupted his training as a chef, learnt partly from his father
and partly from night school classes. They had planned to meet again when Janice started her university course in Leeds, not far from Ilkley. Fate had stepped in, however, and their plans had changed. In early September, Lillian had been taken ill suddenly with a brain tumour. Janice had decided not to go away to college, but to stay and run the hotel to the best of her ability, with the help of the assistants who had worked with Lillian. Phil, on hearing of their predicament, had come with the total agreement of his father to help at the Floribunda Hotel until the holiday season finished in October, when the illuminations came to an end. Lillian had never fully recovered from her operation and died early the following year. Phil had still been helping there, but he'd had his own work with his father to return to, and Janice had known that she could not run the hotel on her own. It had been quite a wrench for the Butler family when they'd sold the hotel and moved to a bungalow near to Stanley Park on the outskirts of town. Janice had known by this time that her future lay in the catering business. She'd given up all thoughts of university and enrolled for a year's course at a catering college in Blackpool, after which she'd worked for a while at a seafront hotel. Her friendship with Phil had blossomed into love, and they were married in 1958. Phil had had a stroke of good fortune. He had long wanted a place of his own, not wishing to work with his father forevermore. Then his elderly aunt, his mother's much older sister, died, and made him almost her sole beneficiary. Not a vast fortune, but enough to buy a place that he and Janice could run together. They had looked for premises close to Ilkley, although Phil had not wanted to set up in opposition to his father. Then, searching a little further afield, they had found just the place they wanted in Harrogate. A shop with vacant possession at the end of a terrace. It had once been a bakery. It was a half-mile or so from the town, facing the vast expanse of grassland known as the Stray. It had needed a lot of renovating, but they had opened eventually in the summer of 1958. They had decided on the name Grundy's, their own surname, short and easy to remember. It was a cafe or tea room rather than a restaurant. They served morning coffee or tea, light lunches and afternoon teas. After a while, they started to open in the evenings for private pre-booked parties, family celebrations, or small gatherings of friends. The downstairs dining room, which could seat up to 18, although this was rather a tight squeeze, overlooked the peaceful scene of the Stray. The upstairs family accommodation was adequate for the time being: a large living room, kitchen, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. Sarah at the moment was sleeping on a cot in their bedroom, but they knew that arrangement could not carry on indefinitely. She would need her own room before long, and a bed instead of a cot. The spare bedroom was used for visitors. Not that there were many who stayed overnight. The exception was Ian, Janice's younger brother, who came to stay with them during his school holidays, not just as a guest, however. He helped in the cafe, mainly as a waiter, but also worked in the kitchen doing odd jobs, washing up, preparing vegetables, and being generally useful. Over the last year, during his visits at Christmas and the Easter holidays, he had shown more interest in the cooking and preparation of food, so much so that he had decided, as his sister had done, that his future lay in the catering business. He had spent 1 year in 6th form at the grammar school in Blackpool. Then, instead of going into the upper 6th, he had enrolled at the catering college in Blackpool, where Janice had done most of her training. "Do you think Ian will come and work here as usual during the holidays?" Phil asked now. "Possibly," replied Janice. "But you never know what possibilities might arise in Blackpool. There are so many hotels looking for staff, and he'll meet all sorts of different people. Who knows what opportunities might come his way?" "I was rather surprised he decided to stay in Blackpool to do his training," said Phil. "I would have thought, under the circumstances, he might have preferred to go away to a residential college."
"You heard what he said, though. Dad persuaded him it would be more sensible to stay at home, cheaper for one thing, and the Blackpool College has a good reputation."
"Even so, it might have done him good to get right away," said Phil. Ian was Janice's only brother, 6 years younger than herself. He had been 12 years old when his mother died, and it had come as a dreadful shock to him, as it had to Janice and her father Alec. Ian, though, had kept his feelings to himself, not speaking much about his sadness. He'd still felt secure in his home background and the love of his father and sister. Although there was quite an age difference, the two of them had been close, more so than many siblings. Ian had been upset when Janice and Phil got engaged, even though he liked Phil and regarded him very much as an elder brother. He had reacted quite badly when he realised they would be living in Yorkshire after their marriage. He had seemed to imagine they would stay in Blackpool and the status quo would remain unchanged. The final blow for Ian had been when 2 years after his mother's death, his father had remarried.
"He's in a much better frame of mind, though, now," Janice went on. "I noticed a great change in him this summer."
Ian had spent the summer break working with them at Grundy's before starting his college course. Janice was aware of how much he had matured. Just turned 17, he was a good-looking lad, dark-haired like his father, but much taller and slimmer, with grey eyes that were more often thoughtful than shining with humour. Janice and Phil had told him how pleased they were that he had finally decided on his future career.
"I thought at one time you'd fancied being a car mechanic," Phil had reminded him just before he started his course. "Just a passing phase. That time I stayed with Uncle Len," Ian had responded. "I enjoyed tinkering about with cars, but Len owns his own garage, and it would be ages before I could do that. I got really interested in your business while I was working here, and then I thought, yes, that's what I'd like to do, train to be a proper chef like you are, Phil. But I suppose it's also something I've inherited from my mum and my grandma before her."
"You never had anything to do with a hotel, though," Janice had said, "or boarding house, as it used to be called."
"No, but I was too young, wasn't I?"
"I dare say Mum would have wanted you to go to university, like she wanted me to do, to have all the chances she and Dad never had. That's what she used to say. It was always her idea rather than mine that I should go, but it wasn't to be."
"Dad never had much to do with the hotel either, did he?" Ian had said.
"Not with the running of it, no, but he was always there to lend a hand when she needed him. He used to carry the luggage upstairs and do any odd jobs that arose. And he had his own job of work to go to each day. He still does, of course." Alec Butler worked as a maintenance engineer for an electrical company. He had originally lived in Burnley, where he worked in the cotton mill. But after meeting and falling in love with Lillian at her mother's boarding house, he had given up his job, and chance of promotion, to come and live in Blackpool. That had been back in the early 30s, and there had been no question of Lillian moving to Burnley. She could not be spared from the boarding house where she worked for her mother, with hardly more than pocket money for pay. Florence Cartwright, always known as Florrie, had been a hard taskmaster, like many of her ilk. Widowed during the Great War, she had moved to Blackpool from Wigan with her 2 children, and had become a seaside landlady, largely self-taught, with only skills in cooking and baking that she'd learnt from her own mother. And so it had been with her daughter Lillian. She had left school at 14 and started work in the North Shore boarding house, no matter what other ideas she might have had regarding her own choice of work. What Florrie Cartwright said went without question. Lillian had worked uncomplainingly, though, before and after her wedding, and had carried on with the business after her mother's death. She had insisted, however, that it should then be known as a private hotel rather than a boarding house, and she had given it a name, Floribunda, partly in memory of her mother, and partly because she loved Floribunda roses, something which Florrie would have called ostentatious and having ideas above one's station. "You'll be more highly trained than any of us once you've finished your training," Phil had told Ian, who was starting on a 2-year course. Janice had done only 1 year. "Times have changed tremendously. In your grandma's day, the folk who ran hotels, well, boarding houses, were self-taught. Skills were handed down, mother to daughter through the generations. It was mainly the women, of course, who were in charge of such places." "Yes, I remember Grandma Florrie," Janice had said. "You won't remember much about her, Ian. She never had a proper cookery lesson in her life, and she handed on what she knew to our mother. Mum did go to some night school classes as well, though, to learn about what she called more fancy dishes. In Grandma's day, it was just plain, wholesome food: Lancashire hot pot, shepherd's pie, sausage and mash, fish and chips. But the same visitors used to come back year after year. Florrie Cartwright had a good reputation, and so did Mum when she took over. Mum changed things quite a lot, though. For one thing, she changed the tariff to bed, breakfast and evening meal, instead of providing 3 meals a day like they did in Grandma's day. It must have been jolly hard work. Cook breakfast, midday dinner, and what they called high tea. Anyway, when it changed, it gave the workers some free time in the middle of the day, and it gave the visitors the whole day as well, so they could go further afield if they wanted to, although hardly any of them came in their own cars. "And there would be a change in the menu too," Phil had added. "I don't suppose your grandma had ever heard of starters, Janice?" "Good gracious, no. She would have thought that was a very odd idea. No, it was just dinner and pudding, usually rice, or fruit tart with custard, or steamed puddings. I don't suppose anyone bothered about their waistlines. Of course, people did a lot more walking then. Mum tried to get away from the stodgy sort of puddings. She did more trifles, or ice cream or meringue dishes, and gâteau, but she used to buy them ready-made. That was what I specialised in at college, cake and pastry making. I wanted to become more professional." "And so you did," Phil had told her. "Your fancy cakes and pastries are really out of this world. There are hardly ever any left at the end of the day. And I've even managed to perfect my choux pastry. With Marjorie's help, the eclairs and choux buns are very popular. I think we're a good team, Phil, with you concentrating on the main savoury dishes, not forgetting Toby and Marjorie, of course." "And we mustn't forget Ian either," Phil had said, grinning at his young brother-in-law. "You've worked really hard for us, and I like to think we've taught you something as well. But you're going to learn more about the catering business from the real experts. You're still quite happy about staying in Blackpool, are you?" "Yes, I'm okay about it now. It makes sense to live at home rather than in digs. And I'm learning to live with the situation, with Dad and Norma, I mean." He'd given a rueful grin. "I never really disliked Norma, you know. Actually, she's jolly nice. But it was such a shock when Dad said they were getting married. I didn't think he would ever want anybody else after Mum. And she's so different from Mum, not just in looks, but in everything." They had known what Ian meant. They'd had this sort of conversation before. A few months after Lillian's death, one of Alec's workmates had invited him to go along to a social club he attended. It was not the sort of thing Alec had done before. He had enjoyed an occasional pint at the local pub, and he and Lillian had gone out to a cinema or maybe to a church social evening when she was not too busy with the hotel. It had seemed that Alec and Lillian were all in all to one another. Certainly Ian had thought so. Alec found that he enjoyed the club and the camaraderie of the men, mostly men, although some of the wives went along as well. He played darts and became a member of the team, and played bowls during the summer season. Norma served at the bar and joined in the other activities as well. Alec had been attracted to the dark-haired, vivacious widow, although he was wary at first. But her overtures to him were only friendly, to make him feel welcome there. She was that sort of person. Their growing friendship had developed into something more, and they had married barely 2 years after his wife's death, which seemed a very short time to Ian. She had sold her own home and come to live at the bungalow. Norma worked in the dress department at a store in Blackpool, and was always well-groomed and fashionably dressed, a most attractive lady all round, and she had done her best to be friendly and understanding towards Ian, who was in his early teens. Although he was never openly rude or antagonistic towards her, she knew of his resentment. Then one Christmas, he had fled from his home and gone to stay with Janice and Phil. They had tried to make him realize that life would be much easier if he learnt to adjust to what had happened. And now, a couple of years later, things were much better.
"Yes, we've always found Norma very pleasant," Janice had said in answer to his remark. "She was great when we opened up here, helping me to choose the crockery and furnishings. And she makes Dad happy again. We mustn't resent him, finding a new lease of life, Ian. He's only in his early 50s, and Norma's about the same age."
"No, like I said, I'm okay now," Ian had reassured her. "I expect I'll be out a lot more when I start the course. Actually, I'm really looking forward to it now that I've made up my mind."
"And Sophie will be looking forward to her college course as well," Janice had said. "We'll miss her here, unless she comes to work for us during the college breaks, although she might have a lot of studying to do."
"Yes." Ian had looked woebegone for a moment. "We've said we'll write to one another and meet up when we can, but who knows?" He'd shrugged and given a sad smile.
"Cheer up," Phil had told him. "You're only very young, both of you, but if it's right, it will work out for you like it did for Janice and me."
"We're only friends," Ian had said. "Well, a little bit more than that, but nothing serious, if you know what I mean. But I like her a lot." Sophie Miller was Ian's first girlfriend. She lived not far from Grundy's, and had worked as a waitress along with some other friends during the school holidays. That was how she and Ian had met. Sophie was 18, a year older than Ian, and would very soon be starting a teacher training course at a college in Leeds, living there in a hall of residence.
"What will be," Phil had told Ian. "Just try to look forward, not back, and make the most of whatever comes along. I'm sure you'll go far, Ian. You've got what it takes."
Ian had returned to Blackpool soon after to prepare for his new venture. And now, a couple of weeks later, Janice and Phil were wondering how he was going on, both he and Sophie at her college in Leeds.
"It will do Ian good to meet a whole lot of different people," said Phil. "He met Sophie when he was feeling all lost and sorry for himself. She was good for him. But as I told him, what will be, will be."
Chapter 3. As Christmas approached, Grundy's began to get very busy, particularly in the evenings. When they had first opened, they had concentrated on the daytime trade, morning coffee, light lunches, and afternoon teas. That had been plenty to cope with when they were finding their feet
and waiting to see if their new venture would prove popular. Quite soon, Grundy's had become well known in the area, and it was then that Phil decided they would open in the evenings, but only in a small way, for private parties that must be pre-booked. The customers were given a choice of menus from which to choose in advance, and the system had worked very well. They were particularly busy on Saturday evenings, and often opened 2 or 3 other evenings each week. They always closed on Sunday for the whole day. Sunday was still, by and large, regarded as a day of rest, whether one chose to think of it as the Sabbath day or just a time for relaxation. By the end of October, they were almost fully booked for evenings in the month of December. They always closed down entirely over the Christmas period, finishing at tea time on Christmas Eve and reopening on the 28th of December. They had always wanted this time of year to themselves to see their families, and particularly now, to spend time with their little daughter Sarah. "If these bookings continue, we shall need larger premises," Phil remarked to Janice at the beginning of November, as he penciled in yet another date. He was laughing as he said it, but she could tell that an idea was taking shape in his mind. "Do you mean it?" she asked. "Really?" "Well, it's a thought," he replied. "We always knew the cafe area was small, and it does okay for the daytime trade, for people popping in for a quick snack or a chat over a cup of tea or coffee. But the evenings are proving more popular than I dared to hope, and we can't accept bookings for more than 16 or 18 at a pinch. They need space to move around." "But we don't have the space, do we? There's the kitchen at the back and the storeroom, so we can't extend any more there. And upstairs it's our own private place." "Yes, I know, but we've said that we really need another bedroom. Sarah ought to have her own room soon, and that means we won't have a spare room for when Ian comes to stay, or anyone else for that matter. I was wondering if we could find a house nearby." He stopped, looking at Janice quizzically. "Go on," she said, smiling at him encouragingly, but with a touch of amusement. "I'm trying to keep up with you and your big ideas." "Well, we could turn the upstairs into a restaurant just for the evening functions. And this is a good residential area. I'm sure we could find a house nearby. It would have to be quite near, and use these premises just as our workplace." "Phew, you're certainly ambitious, but there's a lot to consider. Can we afford it? I know we're doing quite well, but we mustn't bite off more than we can chew. And think of all the work involved, a lot of structural work. And wouldn't we need another kitchen upstairs?" "Possibly. I haven't really thought about the details. Perhaps it's just a pipe dream. Let's wait till after Christmas and see what the bookings are like in the new year." "Yes, we've quite enough to think about at the moment." Janice felt somewhat bewildered. She hadn't realised that Phil had such grandiose schemes. She was quite contented with the way things were, especially as Sarah, at 15 months, was starting to walk and needed watching most of the time. She was a good child, though, and Janice was able to fit her work around meal times and rest times. She made sure she had time to devote to Sarah each day, to take her for a little walk, to supervise her meals, now she was eating more than baby food, and to make bath time and bedtime a happy time for both of them. "Yes, we'll think more about it in the new year," she said to Phil, not wanting to dismiss his idea entirely. "We have this Christmas to consider first. Christmas Day is on a Sunday, which is our day off anyway." "And people might have Tuesday off work as well as Monday," added Phil, "in lieu of Boxing Day. So we should certainly do the same. Close at tea time on Saturday, Christmas Eve, and open again on the following Thursday.
That will give us a few days to ourselves." "I'm pleased that Ian is coming to help us again," said Janice. "I thought he might have been offered work at one of the Blackpool hotels. A lot of them do a special 4-day Christmas break. But he decided he wanted to come here, as usual." "And we'll be glad of his help too," agreed Phil. "We're fully booked every evening the week before Christmas. We'll certainly be ready for a few days' break after that." "I don't suppose we are the only attraction," said Janice. "No doubt he'll be meeting up with Sophie again, although he hasn't actually said so. And she hasn't said that she wants to help out here either. It might be expecting too much of her after her first term at college. She'll probably be ready for a rest. We could take on a couple of students, though, like we've done before. Those 6th formers from the girls' school are keen to earn some pocket money. Or do you think we can manage without them?" "You never know from day to day with the morning and afternoon trade. Sometimes it's crowded, and other times we only get a few. A lot depends on the weather. It's a fair distance to walk from town if it's raining. Some women like to pop in for tea or coffee when they've done their shopping, those that live locally. Some ladies make it a special meeting place. Groups of them come in the same day each week. Older ladies, though, the ones who have no children to look after." "Or no work to go to," added Phil. "I know there are quite a lot of ladies of leisure in Harrogate who don't need to work. And we don't get any riffraff either," remarked Janice. "Oh dear, that sounds terribly snobbish, doesn't it? But you know what I mean, don't you? It's a very genteel sort of place where people come to retire. I'm so glad we managed to find it. A real stroke of good fortune, wasn't it?" "Good fortune followed by hard work," added Phil. "Don't let's forget that we've made it a success, the two of us, and our excellent staff. Anyway, let's think about Christmas. What are we going to do? Same as usual? We usually go to see my parents on Boxing Day. Okay with you?" "Of course," agreed Janice. "We're always made so welcome, and they'll be looking forward to seeing Sarah again. It's amazing the difference only a few weeks makes when they're at the baby stage. I'm not too sure about going to Blackpool, though. It's a long way to travel for a day, although I suppose we could stay overnight. But Ian will be with us, and he'd have to go back with us probably sooner than he intended, and there wouldn't be room for us all in their little bungalow. Isn't life complicated?" "Only if we make it so," replied Phil, always ready to come up with a solution to a problem. "We must see your Dad and Norma, and they'll be anxious to see Sarah again. Supposing they were to come here, instead of us going there. No, I know we haven't much room either, but they could have our bedroom. We could make do on the couch for one night." "No, I've a better idea," said Janice. "They must have the spare room. Ian won't mind camping out in the living room. We've got a comfy couch. That is, if they want to come." "Did you mean the day after Boxing Day?" "Yes, of course. I didn't mean Christmas Day. We like that day to ourselves. I know it will mean extra work when they come, but don't worry about that. I shall see to the cooking, and Ian will be here to help me. Then you can have some time with your Dad and Norma. What do you think?" "Yes, it's a good idea. Depending on what they say, of course. They might have other plans. They've a lot of friends, people from the club, and there's Norma's sister." "Well, we'll ask them and see how they feel about it." Alec and Norma were delighted when Janice invited them to go to Harrogate on the Tuesday after Christmas and to stay overnight. She had phoned one evening in mid-November when they were on their own, Ian having gone out to meet some friends, as he quite often did since he had started at the college. "How very kind of them," said Norma.
especially as they'll be so busy over the Christmas period. I think Janice has really accepted me, hasn't she? I know it must have been hard for her, losing her mum and then embarking on a career change.
I don't think there was ever much opposition from Janice once she'd got used to the idea. She's a sensible girl. And she had Phil with her, of course. Their friendship was starting to develop, so she had other things to think about. I'm glad they decided to make a go of it. We liked Phil straight away, Lillian and me, when she brought him home. I know Lillian would be pleased to see them happily married and doing so well.
And there's been a change in Ian, hasn't there, since he started at the college, said Norma. He seems much more relaxed and at ease with himself now.
Yes, I'm relieved he settled down and decided what he wants to do. I was quite surprised, though, when he decided to go into the catering business. But I know he's always admired Phil. He looked on him as an elder brother, although he had it in his mind that they would stay in Blackpool and run a guest house here after they were married.
Yes, poor lad. He lost his mum and then he found out his sister would be leaving. I'm not surprised he resented me at first.
Yes, I'm sorry. He could be damned awkward and moody, and I must admit I wasn't quite sure how to handle it. You were so patient, love, and understanding, and I'm sure you must have felt like throttling him.
Norma laughed. Well, we're okay now, Ian and me. He'll be over there in Harrogate helping them out, won't he, when we go? He'll probably think he's got away from us for a while, until we turn up again like a bad penny.
He won't bother. Like you said, he's much more relaxed about everything now. And don't forget, he'll be seeing his girlfriend, Sophie, while he's there. He doesn't say very much about her. Can't expect him to. But we've seen letters with a Leeds postmark, haven't we? I'm sure he'll be looking forward to seeing her again.
They're only young, though, Alec. And Sophie's a year older than Ian, isn't she? She's at a co-ed college, I believe. There are young men there as well as girls. She'll no doubt meet lots of different people. It's too much to expect that she won't meet someone else. And Ian, too, of course. He goes out a lot more than he used to. Where is he tonight?
I don't know, replied Alec, and I didn't ask. We can't treat him like a child any more. He's never all that late coming in, and he never has too much to drink.
He shouldn't be in pubs at all, should he? Said Norma.
He's only 17.
Yes, I know, but he looks older, and I'm sure bar staff turn a blind eye, unless there's any trouble.
I know I have to let go of the reins and trust him, and I'm sure he won't let us down.
End of CD 1. CD 2. Chapter 4. Cissy Clarkson pulled her chair closer to the fire and took a long drag at her cigarette. With a cup of tea on a stool at her side, she was relaxing after taking Paul to his infant school just 5 minutes' walk away. The house felt quiet without him, although Holly was still at home, now playing quietly on the hearthrug with her dolls and teddy bear. She had always been a quieter, much more gentle child than Paul, although the two of them had got along well together, probably because they were quite close in age. Paul was now 4.5 and had started school 3 months ago. Holly would be 3 on Christmas Day, now only a couple of weeks away. She missed her brother and didn't understand why she couldn't go to school with him.
"Mummy, when can I go to school like Paul?"
was her constant cry. And Cissy tried to placate her, saying,
"Say Soon, love. Perhaps after Christmas when you're 3. It won't be long.
She hadn't told her, though, that it would not be the school that Paul attended. There was a playgroup not very far from the school, and Sissy had made inquiries there. Yes, they would be willing to take Holly. In fact, they took children as young as 2.5, provided they were no longer in nappies, and were quite happy about being parted from Mummy. Sissy's neighbour Megan, who lived a few doors away, took her little girl Kelly there each day. So Sissy felt sure that Holly would settle in spite of being separated from her brother.
And then what will I do with so much free time on my hands?
Sissy asked herself. Not all that much time, really, because the playgroup was only in the morning, although the children could stay for lunch, if the parents wished, at a nominal charge. Paul stayed for school dinners, as did most of the children. He went off each Monday morning with his 5 shillings of dinner money, 2 half-crown pieces, in an envelope tucked away safely in his pocket. He enthused about the dinners: meat and potato pie, big fat sausages, spaghetti and tomato sauce, and sometimes even fish and chips, and the yummy puddings, jam roly-poly, spotted dick, jelly and custard. He even liked the rice pudding, which some children hated, served with a dollop of red jam that they stirred to make the rice turn pink. Paul seemed to like them all. He had never been a picky eater, but Sissy wondered if her culinary efforts did not match up to the dinners served at school. Fortunately, they were cooked on the premises, in the school's own kitchen, not delivered in tins, as was the case in many of the schools. Sissy had settled down well to her duties as a housewife and mother, to the surprise of many of her friends, who remembered her as a carefree, sometimes irresponsible girl. She had in fact surprised herself. Paul had been born only 6 months after their marriage. Sissy at first had regretted what had happened and resented her loss of freedom. Her bitterness, however, had been short-lived, and when Holly was born 18 months later, her newfound joy in her marriage was complete. There had been 1 or 2 upsets and misunderstandings, but they were on an even keel again now, and looking forward to Christmas. Paul was in a constant state of excitement about all that was happening at school. Next week would be a very busy time, with the school concert and then a party for all the children, when they expected a special visitor with a sack of presents. Sissy had received an invitation to the concert, but she was sorry that Walter, like most of the fathers, would be unable to attend, as it was in the afternoon. She had provided Paul with a striped tea towel, as requested, for his part in the performance.
It's to wear round my head, Mummy, 'cause I'm one of the people who live in Bethlehem. That's where baby Jesus was born, and I can wear my dressing gown.
He'd explained that he didn't have anything to say. The important parts, like Mary and Joseph, the shepherds and the kings, were for the older children. But she understood that every child took part, if only in a small way, and they all sang the carols. Every night they were entertained with Paul's rendition of Away in a Manger and We Will Rock You, with Holly joining in as well.
And we're making all sorts of surprises to bring home, Mummy, but it's a secret.
He had asked for the inside of a toilet roll and an empty washing-up liquid, or similar, bottle, so she was looking forward to seeing the masterpieces that were being created.
I can't wait for this one to start school,
her friend Val had said with feeling when she had seen her the previous week.
Well, not school. Playgroup, perhaps, if they'll take him. They might teach him to behave himself. I'm blessed if I can.
Sissy had taken Holly on a bus up to Queensbury to visit her friend. Val had found it difficult to get to Sissy's home, with 6-month-old Lucy in the pram and Russell to cope with as well. Sissy felt concerned to see her friend so harassed, but Russell really was a little demon. She could not recall that Paul had ever been so bad, although he had had his moments. They had not been in the house very long before Russell had snatched Holly's doll and thrown it across the room, making the little girl cry. No harm had been done, as the doll had landed on the carpet with its china face intact. Val had chastised Russell, shaking him a little and telling him he was a very naughty boy.
"Now, say you're sorry to Holly." "Sorry," he'd said, looking sheepish for a moment. Then he'd snuggled up to Val, wanting attention. She'd ruffled his reddish-golden hair and given him a quick hug. Holly had stopped crying when she saw her precious Belinda was not hurt, and the two children were persuaded to play nicely now, with building bricks and toy cars, while their mothers had a cup of tea.
"He'll settle down, you'll see," Sissy had tried to convince her friend, although secretly she thought the child was getting out of control. Val was such a sensible person, one she had thought could cope with almost anything. Russell was a bonny little boy, but understandably he did not resemble either of his adoptive parents. Val was dark-haired, and so was baby Lucy, and Sam's mid-brown hair had no trace of auburn. It seemed as though Russell would be red-haired, with, possibly, a temperament to match. Only time would tell.
"I certainly hope he'll settle down soon," Val had said, in answer to her friend's remark. "I keep thinking about what Sam's mother said, that he might inherit bad traits from his real parents. His father, she meant, of course. She was very much opposed to us adopting Russell. Sam's dad tries to show no difference in his attitude to the two of them, but I'm afraid that Beatrice makes it quite obvious that Lucy is the favourite. She makes such a fuss of her, and Russell can't help but notice it."
"She should have more sense, silly old cow," Sissy had said, in her usual forthright way. "So, are you looking forward to Christmas?"
"I suppose so," Val had answered doubtfully. Then, "Yes, of course I am," she'd amended. "It's more fun when you have children, although Russell is rather young to understand fully about Father Christmas, and Lucy is still a baby."
"Father Christmas will be visiting both of them, though, won't he?"
"Oh, yes. We took Russell to Bradford to see him. He was rather overawed for once, but he managed to say that he wanted a car and a fire engine. We told him Father Christmas would come if he was a good boy, and he was very good for that day. We'd left Lucy with my mum, so he had our undivided attention." "He's having a pedal car for Christmas," she'd whispered, although the children hadn't seemed to be listening to the conversation. "That was Sam's idea. He had one when he was a little boy, and he loved it. What about you? What is he bringing to your house?"
"Paul wants a tricycle, and Holly—"
The little girl had looked up at hearing her name.
"Holly, tell Auntie Val what you want Father Christmas to bring," Sissy had said.
"A doll's pram," Holly had replied. "And a baby doll with lots of nice clothes. And Paul wants a tricycle."
"Well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we?" Sissy had said.
"It's her birthday, of course, on Christmas Day," she'd added quietly, "so we'll have to make sure she doesn't miss out. It makes it an expensive time, but it isn't her fault, is it, that she was born at Christmas?"
"Now, am I going to have a look at my goddaughter before we go?"
Lucy had been upstairs having her afternoon nap. "Of course," Val had said. "It's time she was awake. I'll go and get her." She'd returned with the wide-awake baby, who'd had no objection to being nursed and fussed by her Auntie Sissy. "Isn't she lovely, Mummy?" Holly had said, gently stroking the baby's cheek. And Lucy had smiled at her, her little face lighting up as though she knew her. Russell hadn't looked up. Sissy had been aware that he was scowling. He'd started to make loud brum-brum noises with his cars, crashing them into the table legs.
Sissy had handed Lucy back to her mother.
"Show me your favourite car, Russell," she'd said to the little boy. "I like this one."
She'd picked up a bright red sports car.
"I wish I had a car like this."
But he'd shook his head and scowled again. Val had looked annoyed, but knew better than to force him to comply. It would do more harm than good.
"Well, it's time we were going," Sissy had said cheerfully. "We mustn't be late meeting Paul from school. Come along now, Holly. Say bye-bye to Auntie Val and Russell."
Sissy had bent down to give the little boy a hug, but he had not responded. Val had kissed Holly's cheek, then put her arm round her friend.
"See you again soon, Sissy. Love to Paul and Walter." "Russell's a naughty boy, isn't he, Mummy?"
Holly had remarked as they walked to the bus stop.
"I don't think I like him very much, but I like Lucy."
"Perhaps he was just feeling a bit cross," Sissy had answered. "We do sometimes, don't we?"
She had thought to herself, though, that Holly's reaction was no doubt the same as that of many other people. Poor Val. Sissy hoped that her friend had not made a dreadful mistake. Sissy, in common with many other mothers who were watching, brushed away a tear as the children performed at the age-old nativity play. Holly, sitting next to her, was enthralled by it all. The angelic-looking Mary gazing tenderly at the doll in her arms, and Joseph standing proudly by her side. The shepherds, with tea-towel headdresses slightly awry, and the kings, resplendent in gold cardboard crowns and robes created from mother's old evening gowns. Paul, as he had said, was
"Just a person from Bethlehem,"
but he sang lustily and was clearly enjoying it all. There was a fun part to the concert, as well as the story of baby Jesus. Children dressed as Christmas crackers, fairies and teddy bears, and rousing choruses of "Santa Claus is coming to town" and "Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer." The party also was a great success, according to Paul. A yummy tea of potted meat sandwiches, jelly and ice cream, and sticky buns. And Father Christmas was there with presents for all the children. A ladybird book for each of them. Paul's, to his delight, was about various models of cars and vans. He confided, however, that he didn't think it was the real Father Christmas.
"We saw a man who looked just like him talking to Mrs. Jones afterwards," he said. "He'd taken off his red coat, but his face was all fat and jolly."
"You're probably right," agreed Sissy. "He has a lot of helpers, because he can't be in so many places at once, can he?"
"No, I suppose not," said Paul thoughtfully.
She wondered how long it would be before the penny dropped entirely. Not for a few years, she hoped. It was good to keep the magic as long as possible. On the last day of term, he brought home the surprises they had made, including a card with a rather lopsided snowman with a printed greeting inside.
"To Mummy and Daddy, Happy Christmas, love from Paul."
It had been copied from the blackboard, as the children were still in the very early stages of reading and writing. But his printing was clear and not too wobbly. A calendar depicted a bowl of flowers made from gummed paper shapes. The toilet roll middle had been used to make a cracker containing dolly mixtures, and the washing-up liquid bottle was transformed into a table decoration. Father Christmas with a red crepe paper coat, a hat, and a cotton wool beard.
"It's to put on the table on Christmas Day when we have our dinner,"
Paul announced proudly, and Sissy agreed that it would look lovely and add just the right finishing touch. Chapter 5. Ian was enjoying his catering course, now he had become accustomed to the newness and the challenge of it all. It was vastly different from being at school. They were treated as adults rather than adolescents. Many of them, of course, were older, having decided on a career change, and others were similar in age to himself, in their late teenage years. There were girls, or women, as well as men, about 50-50 in proportion. This also was a change for Ian. He had attended an all-boys grammar school and had never had a great deal of contact with girls, apart from at the youth club once a week. He did not find it easy to make new friends. At school, he had had his own set of mates, like-minded boys Gary, Steve and Mike. They had played football together and watched their favourite team, Blackpool, play most weekends. They were all chess addicts, meeting at each other's houses for games between the four of them. The other three had stayed on in the upper sixth form, while Ian had branched out in another direction. He still saw them occasionally, although they had found another fourth member to play chess with them. Ian missed them, but knew that he must settle down and concentrate on his new course of studies. He was looking forward to spending Christmas in Harrogate once again with his sister and brother-in-law. At first he had regarded his visits there as an escape from the situation at home with his father's new wife Norma, and the changes that their marriage had brought about. Also, he had missed his sister Janice. Although they were 6 years apart in age, they had been good friends, and he had liked Phil as well. He had watched him at work in the kitchen, and had admired his skill and dedication to his career, so much so that Ian had decided this was what he wanted to do. So now, in mid-December, he was ready to show his sister and brother-in-law how he had progressed in his studies. And, of course, he would see Sophie again. She was his first girlfriend. He had been surprised and flattered when she had agreed to go out with him. She was a year older than Ian, and was already in the sixth form at her grammar school. When they became friendlier, however, he realized that she also was not very experienced with regard to the opposite sex. They were still just good friends, happy to enjoy kisses and loving embraces, but nothing more than that. Ian knew, though, that Sophie was at a co-ed college, and he wondered if she might meet someone else there who was more mature and worldly wise than he was. Ian's course was comprehensive, covering all aspects of catering: hotel management, bookkeeping, the full range of cookery, baking, pastry making, meat and fish dishes, preparation of vegetables, desserts and puddings, cakes and fancy gâteaux, and the planning of menus. There were 60 students in all, divided into groups for the different lessons and lectures. Ian had not made any particular friends, although he found everyone was pleasant and amiable. Many of the students were not local and were in digs. It was not a residential college, so they had to find their own lodgings. This was not difficult, as there were many boarding houses willing to take students during term time, and private houses too, where the owners were glad of the extra income. Ian knew he was fortunate in one respect, to be living at home. It was cheaper and no doubt more comfortable than many of the digs, although he did not have the freedom that some of the other students were experiencing, being away from home for the first time. Some, like himself, were local, others from nearby towns in Lancashire, and some from quite a distance away, as the college had a very good reputation. It was during the second week of December that Ian was invited to a get-together that some of the students were planning at one of the seafront hotels. A group of first-year students were working in pairs at pastry making. Ian was paired with a young man whom he had seen around, but they had never worked closely together. He introduced himself to Ian.
"I've noticed you at lectures," he said, "but we've never actually met, have we? Not properly. I'm Darren Parkinson, and you are Ian, I think?"
"Yes, that's right," he replied. "Ian Butler. Pleased to meet you at last."
"Yes, same here."
The two young men grinned at each other, but did not shake hands, as they were all sticky with pastry.
"I think you're a local lad, aren't you?" said Darren. I thought someone said you lived in Blackpool.
Yes, so I do. I'm a day student. It has its pros and cons. It's cheaper living at home, of course, with my dad and stepmother, and I don't have far to travel each day. I usually cycle here, but it's near enough to walk. The college was less than a mile from his home. On the other hand, I sometimes feel I miss out on the social side with going home each night. I haven't had a chance to get to know anyone really well. Don't get me wrong, I'm not unsociable, but I suppose, well, I'm not really the sort to push myself. I've stayed to one or two things, but on the whole, I've been concentrating on getting on with the job in hand. What about you, Darren? You're in digs, I suppose. I don't think you're a local lad.
No, I'm from Bury.
Yes, I guessed you were from somewhere in mid-Lancashire.
The accent's a giveaway, isn't it? Not that I want to disguise it. Why should we?
No, you're right. There's a Blackpool accent too. Apparently, we don't pronounce words like moon and school correctly. We tend to say moon and school. I don't think we know till it's pointed out to us. My brother-in-law noticed. He's from Yorkshire, and that's another different accent.
Yes, we're all different, aren't we?
Darren commented.
That's what makes life so interesting. Anyway, as I was saying, my home's in Bury, so I'm in digs in Hornby Road. It's only a short walk away. I'm the only student there. Mrs. Riley, she's the landlady, takes visitors. It's a small boarding house, but she likes to take a student or two. She feels she's doing her bit for the local college.
But you're the only one there?
Yes, at the moment. Actually, it's a double room with 2 twin beds, so there's room for another one. Might you be interested?
Me? Oh no, like I said, it's cheaper living at home, and I think Dad would take a dim view if I said I wanted to move. Why? Would you like someone to share with you?
Possibly, if it was the right person. The grub's good, cooked breakfast, and a very satisfying evening meal, same as the visitors have. Of course, there are none there at the moment. She stayed open till the end of the lights, as they call it, the end of October, and she'll open for visitors again around Easter time. So, at the moment, I'm dining with the family. Mr. and Mrs. Riley and their daughter Alison. She's 17, a year younger than me.
Oh, that's nice for you then, observed Ian.
Not really.
Darren shrugged.
Not my type. Anyway, you were saying you haven't got around much yet, not had a chance to meet many of the students. Would you like to?
Well, yes, I suppose I would. I mean, yes, that would be great.
I guess I'm pretty much the same sort of person as you, said Darren. I keep myself to myself a lot of the time, then realise I must make more effort. I got talking to 2 lads who lodge near to me, and they've invited me along to a do. They're organising at a hotel on the prom, the Pier View, opposite Central Pier. Not a very original name. Do you know it?
No, I can't say I've noticed it, but there are thousands of hotels, aren't there?
So, would you like to come along? They said I could bring a friend.
Yes, I would like that. Thanks very much.
It's Wednesday next week at 8 o'clock. That's just before we break for Christmas. There'll be quite a few private parties going on next week, I suppose, but this one is Guy and Ant's idea. They sing and play the guitar, so they'll be entertaining us. There'll be about 18 or 20 there, they said. A few drinks, of course, and they've arranged for us to have a buffet supper. So, you'll come?
Yes, I'd love to, but there's one snag. I'm only 17, not old enough to drink.
Who's to know? You look older than that, and don't tell me you've never had a drink.
Of course I have. Well then, what's the problem?
There isn't one. Ian laughed, feeling very pleased and happy. Will there be girls there as well? Not just for the lads, is it? Darren gave him what seemed to be an odd look.
Well, yes, I should think so. They didn't actually say, but I assume there will be. Does it matter?
No, I just wanted to know. I shall look forward to it. They had been working companionably together as they talked, and the apple pie they were preparing was now ready to go into the large oven, together with those of the other students.
I think that's a jolly good effort of ours,
said Darren, admiring the carefully crimped edging to the pie, the decoration of pastry leaves on the top, and the milk and egg glaze, which would ensure a golden, glossy finish.
Yes, very well done, you two, said the woman tutor passing by their table. Now, clear away, wash up, and leave everything tidy. That's the most important part of food preparation, as you know. It's getting near the lunch break, half an hour or so. Your pies should be ready to take out before you go.
The students' efforts were made use of in the cafeteria at midday. Ian and Darren were highly satisfied with their creation. It smelled very appetizing too.
I wish my brother-in-law could see that,
Ian remarked, as they made their way to the dining area.
He'd be quite impressed.
The Yorkshireman? Inquired Darren.
Why? Is he in the catering business?
Oh, yes. He and my sister run a cafe in Harrogate. They opened it soon after they got married a couple of years ago.
That was really what inspired me. I've been over to help them during the school holidays, just as a general dog's body to begin with, although I did quite a lot of waiting on at the tables. And I got really interested in what was going on in the kitchen. So, here I am, hoping to be a qualified chef myself one of these days. What about you, Darren? What made you decide to go into catering? Dunno, really. I've always enjoyed my food. My mum's a smashing cook, and I used to help her in the kitchen along with my sister. She's 2 years older, but my mum said that cooking wasn't just for girls. My dad didn't agree. He's a real male chauvinist. He lets Mum wait on him hand and foot, but she doesn't seem to mind. He's a mechanic, a foreman at a local garage, and he comes home all mucky and oily. He cleans up before he has his meal, but that's him finished then for the day. He didn't half go on at me when I told him what I wanted to do for a career. I won't tell you what he said. Well, I expect you can guess. Not a job for a proper man and all that. I reminded him about Graham Kerr, you know, the galloping gourmet chef on TV, but he said he'd never heard of him. So that's my story. Now, let's see what they've got to tempt us today.
Neither of them needed more than a snack, as they would be enjoying a good evening meal. They chose the soup of the day, which was tomato with a crispy roll, followed by a piece of lemon meringue pie. Ian found it was good to have someone to chat to over the meal. It was strange that their paths had never really crossed until now, although they had known one another by sight, in the way that they knew most of the students. Ian was pleased that he had found a mate with whom he was compatible, or so it seemed at first acquaintance.
"See you around then,"
said Darren, as they went their separate ways after lunch to different lectures.
"If we don't meet again, I'll see you on Wednesday night at the Pier View, around 8 o'clock. OK?"
"Yes, thanks again. I'll look forward to it. Just casual dress, I suppose?"
"Yes, come as you are, but without the chef's apron, of course."
Ian laughed, feeling very light-hearted, and as though he really belonged at last. Darren grasped his arm in a friendly gesture as they parted.
"See you then. Cheerio for now."
"Yes, bye for now. I'm glad we got to know one another," he added a little self-consciously.
"Me too."
Darren grinned as he walked away.
Alec and Norma were pleased that Ian had been invited to a college gathering. They had been concerned that he had not really become part of the social scene. They knew he missed his mates from school, and he had not spoken much about the students he had met. Alec did not warn him about the dangers of drinking too much. He thought he was a sensible lad who knew his limitations. Anyway, he had to find his own way around in the big wide world. Ian dressed with care on the Wednesday evening. He had a fairly new suede jacket in a light tan colour that he had bought with his earnings from Grundy's. It went well with his black trousers, pale blue shirt, and a slim tie in a darker shade of blue.
"Gosh, you look handsome," Norma remarked when he was ready to leave. "All the girls will be giving you the eye tonight."
"Oh, I'm not bothered about that." He blushed slightly. "It's just nice to be invited somewhere."
"Well, have a good time," said his father. "We'll probably be in bed when you get back, but you've got your key. Now, you must get a taxi back. Here, take this." He handed him a 10-shilling note.
"Thanks, Dad. I'm walking there, though. It's a nice, mild night." It was a good mile to the hotel near Central Pier, but Ian walked briskly and arrived just after 8 o'clock. He stepped through the swing doors and was greeted by the sound of chattering voices and laughter and the aroma of cigarette smoke and ale. It felt and looked warm and cosy with a rich red carpet, wood-panelled walls, and comfortable armchairs, and benches upholstered in a red plush fabric. There was a bar at the side with several people waiting to be served. As he stared around, wondering where to go, Darren appeared.
"Hi there. I was just coming to meet you."
He took Ian's arm.
"We're through here."
He led the way to a room at the rear of the building, similarly furnished and with a smaller bar. There appeared to be about 10 or 12 there already, both men and girls. Ian recognised several of them. Some looked up and said, "Hello," while some said, "Hello, Ian," which made him feel more at home. Darren led him to a table where 2 lads were sitting, and 2 girls who might or might not have been their girlfriends. Ian wasn't sure, but he knew them by sight.
"Nancy, Sally, Bob, and Jack."
Darren introduced them casually.
"And this is Ian."
They all greeted him in a friendly way, and he sat down on a bench with his back to the wall. Darren sat down next to him.
"We've decided to have a kitty," he said. "We'll all put some money in, then there's no arguing about whose round it is. Okay with you?"
"Yes, sounds like a good idea," said Ian. "What do you suggest?"
"Well, we've each put £1 in. Is that okay?"
"Yes, fine." Ian took out his wallet and put a £1 note on the table with the rest of the money. The groups at the other tables seemed to be doing the same.
"I'll go and get a round in while it's not too busy," said Darren. "What'll you have?"
"Oh, shandy, please," said Ian, playing it safe.
"OK, what about the rest of you?"
The other 4 gave him their orders, and Darren went off to the bar. Ian watched him standing there, looking very confident. Ian would have felt self-conscious ordering drinks. Darren was a good-looking lad, more well-built than Ian, with a pleasant round face and fair wavy hair that he did not damp down with brilliantine. Ian had dark brown hair, which was perfectly straight. Darren returned with the drinks, and they all raised their glasses and said,
"Cheers!"
By this time, several more had arrived, and the noise level had risen. Ian tried to do a quick head count. 18, 19, which was more or less the number Darren had said. He recognised most of them. There was a small platform at the opposite end from the bar, and in a few moments 2 young men carrying guitars made their way there.
"Guy and Ant," said Darren. "Do you know them?"
"I've seen them around."
"They're from Preston.
They were at school together there."
They tuned up their guitars. Then one of them stepped forward.
"Hello, folks," he began. "We're pleased you've all come, and Aunt and I will do our best to entertain you."
There was a rousing cheer and hearty applause.
"OK, then. We'll start with Peggy Sue. That's one of Buddy Holly's. Then Walking in the Rain, the fabulous Johnny Ray's song."
They sounded very professional. Guy sang the melody line, and Aunt harmonized below. They had pleasant, light tenor voices. The audience listened appreciatively, then joined in with the repeats. They entertained for almost half an hour, progressing to several Elvis numbers, then Cliff Richard's Living Doll.
"Enjoying yourself?"
asked Darren.
"Very much so," replied Ian. "Glad you invited me. Wouldn't have wanted to miss this."
"My pleasure,"
said Darren. He put an arm round Ian's shoulders for a moment. Then, just as quickly, he withdrew it. The other four, Nancy, Bob, Sally and Jack, appeared to be casual boy and girl friends. Glancing around, Ian noticed other couples, but there were more men there than girls. Some of the lads sitting together in a group, and others, like himself and Darren, looking as though they might be mates. There was a pause in the entertainment, while they went to the buffet bar and chose what they wanted to eat from the selection on offer. Assorted sandwiches, sausage rolls, pork pies, chicken drumsticks, crisps and salad items. They replenished their glasses and sat down to eat, while a man who was the resident pianist at the hotel sat down and played popular tunes of the day. There was a space between the tables, making a small dance floor, and some of them, mainly the girls and a few lads, got up and danced, jigging and twisting and shaking to the livelier numbers, all shook up, jailhouse rock and mambo italiano. Ian and Darren sat in a companionable silence. There didn't seem to be any need to talk. Ian was enjoying himself more than he had thought he would, feeling carefree and just a little light-headed after his third shandy. "Watch it," he said to himself. "Orange juice next time." Then the pianist started to play a song by Elvis, "Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear," and most of them sang along. To his surprise and slight shock, Darren put an arm round his shoulders again, singing along with a twinkle in his eye. It passed through Ian's mind that his friend did resemble a teddy bear, with his round face and shock of blonde hair. He grinned at him, feeling a little uncomfortable, then gradually pulled himself away. Probably Darren had had too much to drink. He was on double diamonds, not shandies. The evening drew on. Guy and Aunt entertained them again. Then they introduced a girl, one of the students, who was also a musician. Her name was Stephanie Gray. Guy introduced her, then they accompanied her, as she sang several soulful songs that they all knew, but they listened without joining in, as she had such a melodic voice. They were all love songs, April Love, When I Fall in Love, and Softly, Softly Come to Me, which Ruby Murray, with her seductive voice, had made so popular. "She's good, isn't she?" said Ian. "I've noticed her at some of the lectures, but I had no idea she had such a lovely voice." "Yes, a hidden talent," replied Darren, "or not hidden in her case. She's willing to share it with others. It's surprising what might be lurking beneath the surface in all of us. Who knows what talents we may possess?" Darren had lowered his voice. It was soft and persuasive, and Ian was starting to feel uncomfortable. He glanced around. Nancy and Bob, Sally and Jack had eyes for only each other. And at the other tables, everyone was listening intently to Stephanie. Lads with their arms round their girlfriends, and some lads, Ian noticed, sitting close together, as were he and Darren. But no one was taking any notice of what was going on at other tables.
He felt even more alarmed when Darren took hold of his hand, gently and unobtrusively beneath the table. It suddenly dawned on him what this was all about.
"Ian," Darren began, "are you sure you won't change your mind about sharing my digs? I'm sure we'd get on well together, you and me."
His blue eyes were looking intently into Ian's grey ones. Ian pulled his hand away.
"I'm sorry. You've made a mistake,"
he managed to say, but his words sounded gruff and hesitant. He was unsure how Darren might take his rejection. He might turn nasty. So he half smiled at him.
"I'm sorry, but I'm not, like that. I hadn't realised."
Fortunately, Darren also smiled, rather sheepishly. He shrugged.
"Well then, I'm sorry too, for jumping to the wrong conclusion. I thought when you said you kept yourself to yourself and you hadn't made many friends, you might be looking for someone like me. Sorry, my mistake."
Ian was nonplussed. It was the first time to his knowledge, at least, that he had met anyone like that. He had heard about them. Homosexuals was the correct word, but he had heard them referred to as queers or Nancy boys. He did not want to think of Darren like that. He liked him. He had thought he was forming a good male friendship, such as he had had with Steve and Gary and Mike. He felt and must have looked bewildered. Darren touched his hand again, but this time in a matey way.
"Not to worry. No harm done, I hope. Let's forget about it."
But Ian knew he would not be able to forget about it so easily. His eyes had been opened to something he didn't really understand.
"Actually, I've got a girlfriend,"
he said, talking quickly, and he hoped confidently, to try to cover his embarrassment.
"You know how I said I go to help my sister and brother-in-law in Yorkshire? Well, that's where I met Sophie. She was helping out as a waitress, but she's at college now in Leeds, training to be a teacher, so I'll be seeing her again next week." "Good for you," said Darren. "Like I said, I'm sorry. My mistake. No hard feelings, eh?" "No, not at all."
Ian was breathing an inward sigh of relief. It might have been awkward.
I hope you find what you're looking for," he added a little diffidently.
"I might. One still has to be careful," said Darren. "I had a friend back home, but we went our separate ways. Such is life. Now, what about one more drink before we get thrown out? Orange juice again?"
"Yes, thanks."
Ian nodded, still feeling dazed and out of his depth. Darren behaved quite normally when he returned with the drinks. He too had gone on to orange juice. After a final chorus of "Now is the hour," they all started to drift away.
"Shall we share a taxi?" said Darren. "We go the same way and I don't want to walk." "It's okay. You'll be quite safe," he added.
"Fine," said Ian. "I'll pay. My dad gave me the money, and you get out before me." There were a few taxis outside, waiting for the late-night trade. They spoke very little during the journey home.
"Cheerio, then," said Darren, as he got out at his digs. "Have you enjoyed it, in spite of everything?"
"Yes, I have. Honestly," said Ian.
"Bye, then. See you tomorrow, no doubt."
There were 2 days left before the Christmas break. The bungalow was in darkness as he let himself in. He went straight to bed, his mind buzzing with all the new experiences and revelations. All the same, he had enjoyed it immensely. Chapter 6.
"Now we can start to think about our own Christmas festivities," said Janice to Phil
at 4 o'clock on the Saturday, which was Christmas Eve. There had been a steady number of customers, mainly at lunchtime with last-minute Christmas shoppers, but fewer in the afternoon. The cafe looked bright and full of Christmas cheer. A small tree with glistening baubles stood in the window. Tasteful arrangements of holly and ivy, trimmed with red and green ribbons, graced each table, and the walls were adorned with clusters of tiny silver stars. A large red poinsettia on the cash desk added the finishing touch. Only Janice and Phil, Ian and Sophie remained at the end of the afternoon. Toby, the assistant chef, had gone home after lunch, as had the other waitress. Sophie Miller, Ian's friend, had been only too pleased to help out again to earn a little towards her college expenses. They tidied up the tables for the last time for a few days. They would open again on Thursday, and stacked the pots in the dishwasher.
"Will you stay and have a cup of tea with us, Sophie?" asked Janice. "I think we deserve one, don't you?"
"No, thanks, all the same," Sophie replied. "I've quite a lot to do at home. All my presents to wrap, for one thing. I'm very much behind with all that, and I promised I'd help Mum with a few jobs ready for tomorrow. I'll see you tonight, though, Ian, like we arranged. We're going to the Christmas Eve service. Did Ian tell you?"
"Yes, he did," said Janice, "and we're coming along too. I said to Phil that it would be a nice thing to do. So I asked the lady next door if she would babysit. I'm afraid we don't go to church as often as we should. I know we're closed on Sundays, but we tend to regard it as a day of rest for us. And there's Sarah, of course." She smiled rather apologetically. "But it's all too easy to make excuses for not going, isn't it?"
"Yes, I suppose so," said Sophie. "Mum and Graham said they'd go along as well tonight. Mum said, like you did, that it's a good thing to do. So I'll see you later, Ian. I'll meet you outside the church at about 11 o'clock, OK?"
"Yes, see you then," Ian said, as Sophie put on her coat and made for the door. "No, wait a minute. I'll walk home with you."
"Don't be silly," she retorted. "I'm a big girl, aren't I? I'm not going to get lost."
She blew him a kiss and went out into the darkness of the early twilight. Ian went upstairs to the comfortable living room. There was a coal fire blazing in the hearth. The place was centrally heated, but they preferred the coziness of a fire in winter. A large tree stood in the window, and Phil had switched the lights on, only partially drawing the curtains so that it shone out into the darkness, like many other trees in the neighbourhood. A pile of presents lay beneath it, the majority of them for little Sarah Lillian, now aged 15 months. She was too young to know about Father Christmas, but Janice insisted that she should have a stocking to open in her cot. Even though she didn't understand the significance, Janice did, and she would have just as much pleasure from it as her daughter. Ian had been there since Tuesday. He had spent the weekend in Blackpool, not wanting to be seen to dash away too quickly, taken a train to Harrogate on Tuesday morning, and met Phil at the station as usual.
"We'll be glad of your help," Phil had told him. "We're particularly busy in the evenings with Christmas meals, so perhaps you could give us a hand at the tables then. Not every evening, though," he'd added with a smile. "You'll be pleased to know that Sophie is working with us again, and I know you'll want to spend some time with her."
Ian had been pleased to hear that, and he'd hoped that Sophie likewise would want to spend some time with him. She had called at Grundy's to offer her services, and Janice and Phil had been pleased to employ her again. She'd been busy waitressing when Ian arrived, but popped up to see him later in the family living room. He'd felt a little shy at seeing her again after so long. It had been about 3 months. He didn't kiss her, as he was embarrassed with his sister being there, but they arranged that they would meet later that evening.
"Unless you want me as a waiter tonight?" he'd asked Phil. "No, you can start tomorrow," Phil had said, "and we'll see how it goes."
Ian had walked round to Sophie's home, a few minutes' walk away, at 7:30 that Tuesday evening. She'd invited him in to say hello to her mother and stepfather Graham. He had met them occasionally and found them very friendly and welcoming. When he had first met Sophie, they had found that they had this in common. Ian's father had remarried, and so had Sophie's mother, and her father as well, but in her case it had been because of divorce. Her father had met a younger woman, and they now had a little girl. Sophie said that she got on well with Graham now, but she had resented him at first, or had pretended to do so, just as Ian had done with Norma. But all was well again with the two families. The shyness they had felt at meeting again soon disappeared. Ian had kissed her gently as they walked along a secluded pathway on the Stray. They had decided to walk into Harrogate, find a snack bar that was still open, and have a good chat. Ian felt a warm glow of fondness and friendship rather than desire as he looked at her. She was a very pretty girl, with dark hair that curled gently beneath her green woolen hat. She'd worn her green and white striped college scarf, and he had said how dashing it looked. "So, you're enjoying college life?" he'd asked.
Yes, very much so. What about you? How's the catering course going?
Great, I'm really getting into it. I think I'm becoming quite proficient. Well, I hope I am.
Good. Will you be helping Phil in the kitchen?
I might, if he'll let me. I can make a decent apple pie. And we've made Christmas puddings. I gave mine to Norma. But I expect Phil and Janice made theirs ages ago.
There was a jolly, seasonal feeling to the town. Coloured lights shone from the trees along the Stray. A large Christmas tree stood in the main square, and shop windows were still ablaze with lights, displaying toys, stylish clothes, and a myriad of tempting ideas for gifts. They'd found a snack bar on the main street that was still open, sat at a corner table at the back, and ordered strawberry milkshakes and slices of chocolate log with cream that looked delicious.
"Now, tell me about college," Ian had said. "Have you learnt how to teach a class of children?"
She'd laughed.
Well, I'll get there eventually, I suppose. We've had our first teaching practice, being left in charge of a class, but only for part of the time, for PE and story time and just a few lessons. The rest of the time we spent observing the teachers. The kids were nice and friendly, 5- and 6-year-olds, and not too difficult to handle. It was a poor area, though, and an old-fashioned Victorian building, quite an eye-opener, really. But I got good reports from my tutors and the class teacher, so I'm quite pleased with myself.
And what about the social side of the college? I suppose there are all sorts of things to do?
Yes, whatever takes your fancy. There's a film society. They show really ancient films. And there's country dancing, amateur dramatics, and a choir if you can sing. Actually, I've joined that because I enjoyed singing at school. And there are dances on a Saturday night at some of the halls of residence. They take it in turns.
And do you go to them?
Yes, why not?
She'd answered him, a trifle pertly.
But I haven't met anybody, if that's what you want to know. She'd added with a wry grin. We did say, didn't we, Ian, that we didn't want to get serious, that we'd just see how things go?
Of course we did.
He realised he must be careful what he said, or he might lose her altogether.
I just wondered, that's all. You might as well enjoy whatever's going on while you're there.
There are more girls than men, she'd said. 5 women's halls and 3 for the men. And on the whole, the men are about 2 years older than us because they've done their national service. There are not enough to go round. Only joking, she'd added.
Yes, national service, Ian had said. That's something I've just escaped. It's coming to an end in December, isn't it?
Yes, so it is.
Would you have liked to have gone?
Not sure. It would certainly have been an experience. Phil was in the RAF, you know, stationed near Blackpool. That's when he met Janice, so it turned out well for him. Some of the lads at our college have been excused because they're already in the middle of their training.
So, what about the social life at your place? Sophie had asked. Do you take part in it?
I miss out on a lot of it because I'm living at home. Some of the others have made more friends because they meet together in the evenings. Actually, I did go to a party at one of the hotels on the prom last week. A lad I met invited me. There were a couple of the lads playing guitars and singing, and one of the girl students sang. She was really good. And there was lots to drink and eat, of course.
So you enjoyed it?
Yes, I did, in spite of everything.
What do you mean?
Well, I had a strange experience. He'd gone on to tell her in hushed tones about Darren and how he had made tentative suggestions towards him. Honestly, I was scared stiff at first. I was worried he might turn nasty when I spurned his advances, but he was okay about it. I've seen him since then, and he's not said anything else, thank goodness. Sophie had laughed.
And you had no idea he was that way inclined?
No, why should I? It's something I've not really thought about very much. Don't know much about it, to be honest. There was a lad at school who seemed rather odd, and we were suspicious about one of the masters, but it's a punishable offence, isn't it?
Supposed to be, but I rather think a blind eye is turned a lot of the time, if the couples are discreet about it. They're starting to call them gay now, rather than queer. It sounds better somehow, doesn't it?
I suppose so. Ian still felt confused about it all. I thought that gay meant bright and cheerful.
Well, now it stands for good as you, as well as its proper meaning. And it's not just men, you know, who can be that way inclined.
You mean women as well?
Well, yes. Apparently there are girls or women who sometimes fancy one another. There were 2 mistresses at our school who were always together. One taught PE and the other taught French, as different as chalk and cheese, but they were very close friends.
Ian had looked bewildered. I can't imagine it.
No, neither can I, Sophie had agreed. But I'm not really bothered. Live and let live is what I say. There might come a time in the future when no one is bothered about it. Apparently, it's never been a punishable offence for women, because Queen Victoria refused to believe that women would behave like that, so they never passed an Act of Parliament about it.
How do you know all this? Ian had asked.
Oh, it's surprising what girls talk about when they get together. Anyway, let's change the subject. What are your plans for Christmas?
It'll be a quiet Christmas Day so that Janice and Phil can relax after all the extra work. And it'll be fun with little Sarah. Not that she understands all about it, but I'm sure she'll be excited. I'm her godfather, you know, so I take a great interest in her. Then I expect we'll go to Ilkley on Boxing Day to visit Phil's parents. Then, on the Tuesday, my dad and Norma are coming and staying overnight. It'll be the first time they've done that, so it'll be like Christmas Day all over again, I suppose. But we'll be able to spend some time together, you and me, won't we?
Yes, sure. But I'll be catching up with some of the girls from school. My friend Sharon is at a training college in Manchester, and Dawn has started her nursing training at the hospital here. Anyway, you're waiting on for some of the evenings, aren't you?
Just Wednesday and Friday, Phil suggested, so maybe we could go somewhere on the Thursday night. But I'll see you during the day, of course.
Yes, that sounds okay. Come on, let's go. We've been here ages and they'll want to close. We don't want to get thrown out.
They'd walked home hand in hand, happy to be together, but not saying very much. They had already done a great deal of talking. Ian was reflecting on what a friendly and uncomplicated girl Sophie was. Not sophisticated as some girls were, or pretended to be, but already she seemed more knowledgeable about the ways of the world than he was. He'd walked all the way home with her, and they'd exchanged a couple of loving kisses at her gate.
Thanks for a lovely evening, she'd said. See you tomorrow.
Yes, see you. It's been great.
He'd had a spring in his step as he walked back. Life was good and full of promise, and he was growing more mature and sure of himself with each passing day. They had met during the daytime, going about their duties, then went out again on the Thursday evening. There was a rerun of the film Calamity Jane, showing at one of the smaller cinemas, and as Sophie was a fan of Doris Day, Ian had agreed readily to the idea. He'd enjoyed it too, and they'd spent another happy evening together. Their next outing was rather different, the carol service at the local church, which was not far from either of their homes. And tonight they were with their respective families. Phil and Janice's neighbour, who owned the florist shop next door, had willingly agreed to babysit. She didn't go out much in the evenings, but this was very near, and she was fond of all three of them. Janice and Phil, Sophie's mum, Jean, and Graham said hello to one another when they met outside the church. Janice and Phil had attended it only very rarely since Sarah's christening, but they were made to feel very welcome by many of the parishioners who knew them. The 6 of them sat in a pew about halfway down. There was a good number of people there already, and more arriving every minute, as the organist played a selection of Christmas music from the Messiah, and some of the less familiar Christmas carols. There was a warm and friendly atmosphere. The church dated from the Victorian era, with high-backed oak pews, and flat cushions and kneelers of cherry red. Sprigs of holly and small Christmas roses decorated the windowsills, and a display of richly hued chrysanthemums of gold, russet and orange graced the altar. They knew it would be a short service, starting at 11:15 and ending at midnight. There was a hush in the congregation as the organist played the introduction to Once in Royal David's City. They all stood as the choir walked round the church, and the sweet and clear voice of a young boy chorister sang the first verse. Then the choir joined in, and lastly the whole congregation. It was a simple service, with Bible readings telling of the birth of Jesus, the visits of the shepherds and the wise men, and familiar carols which everyone sang wholeheartedly. There was an anthem from the choir, Sing Lullaby, and a seasonal sermon, not too long, from the vicar, speaking of love and friendship made more meaningful with faith in Jesus. Then, at 12 o'clock, the church bells rang out, proclaiming the start of Christmas Day. There was a good deal of handshaking and hugging and kissing from the folk who knew one another, and several people came to greet others who were not such regular attenders. There was no doubt that they were welcome there, along with hopes that they might come again on less auspicious occasions. End of CD 2. CD 3. Ian and Sophie's families stood outside the church, the 2 youngsters looking unsurely at one another.
You're very welcome to come home with us for a glass of sherry, said Sophie's mother to them all, seconded heartily by Graham. Janice and Phil said thanks all the same, but they must go and relieve their babysitter. Another time, maybe.
But you'll stay for a while, Ian, said Janice. I know you would like to.
He nodded thankfully.
But I won't stay long.
Well, you've got your key, but we'll probably still be up when you come back. The four adults exchanged handshakes and kisses and Christmas greetings. Then Ian, a little shyly, followed Sophie into the house.
I wanted to give you this, he said, taking a small gift-wrapped parcel from his pocket. Don't open it till tomorrow. Oh, it's tomorrow now, isn't it? Christmas Day, I mean.
But I'll save it, said Sophie, putting her arms round him and giving him a quick kiss. Her mother and Graham were in the kitchen. And open it with the others. Thanks ever so much. There was a pile of presents under the tree, as there was at Janice and Phil's. And this is yours, she said, handing him a parcel tied with gold ribbon. And this is for little Sarah. That one felt soft and cuddly.
Thanks for mine, and I know Sarah will love it, whatever it is.
Ian was almost bursting with happiness as he walked home. The four of them had drunk a glass of sweet sherry. Then he and Sophie had exchanged a few fond kisses on the doorstep as they said goodbye. He was on top of his own little world. Chapter 7. Well, I hope Russell will behave himself today, said Val to Sam, as they were preparing to leave for Christmas dinner at his parents' home.
There's no reason why he shouldn't, said Sam. He's been as good as gold so far today.
And is it any wonder with all those presents? I know he's been good, but how long will it last? Especially with your mother's eagle eye on him. He's aware of it, you know.
Aren't we all? Said Sam. But she'll be in a good mood today with it being Christmas. At least I hope so. My father knows how to get round her with expensive perfume and jewellery and all that. I don't think you should pander to her so much. But I suppose it's anything for a quiet life.
Well, I'll be glad when we're back home again, said Val. I can never relax completely when I'm there. It's okay, don't worry, she went on, aware of his concerned look. I shall do my best to enjoy it. It'll be a jolly good meal, and your dad's always the life and soul of the party. And Thelma will be there, thank goodness. Her sister-in-law, Thelma, married to Sam's brother Jonathan, had been a great help to Val when she had first met Sam's family, assuring her that Beatrice Walker's bark was worse than her bite, and that one had to humour her to a certain extent. Thelma and Val had become very good friends, and Val was always glad of her bolstering presence on these family occasions. Christmas dinner at the Walkers was quite an ordeal for Val, especially since they had had their family. She had insisted, though, and Sam had agreed, that her own parents must not be overlooked on these festive occasions. And so, each year since they were married in 1957, they had spent Christmas Day, or at least part of it, with the Walkers, and Boxing Day with her family, the Horrockses, or vice versa. And this year, it was the Walkers' turn for the important day. Tomorrow, at her old family home, it would be much more relaxed and enjoyable.
You look very nice, said Sam, as Val turned round from the dressing table, after putting the finishing touches to her appearance, combing her dark hair and coaxing it into a curl, applying a touch of bright red lipstick and green eyeshadow to her brown eyes. Beautiful, in fact. He grabbed hold of her and gave her a quick kiss. You look stunning in your new dress, worth every penny. The cherry-red dress, made from a soft woolen fabric in the new length, just above the knee, complemented Val's dark colouring. It was a present from Sam, from Schofield's store in Leeds. And today he had given her a surprise present, a silver and garnet necklace, which fitted perfectly with the V-shaped neckline of her dress.
You don't look so bad yourself, she replied, returning his kiss.
She had bought him a Jaeger jumper of moss green cashmere as a surprise, And fortunately he was delighted with it. He was wearing it today, as it would be quite an informal occasion.
"Come on now, no time to be canoodling," said Val. "Lucy's all ready, aren't you, darling? Nice and dry and clean and tidy, just the way Grandma likes her."
She picked up 7-month-old Lucy, who had been sitting contentedly on their bed, propped up against a pillow. "What a pretty little girl," said Sam. "Do you know, she looks more like you every day." The child was dark-haired like her mother, with the same warm brown eyes. "Come on then, my two lovely ladies, let's go and find Russell." Russell had been playing happily by himself with his new dinky cars. He had a playpen, which Val did not like overmuch, as she thought it seemed as though they were treating the children like zoo animals, but it was sometimes necessary to separate the two of them. Russell was such a little terror, into everything. "Come on, young fella," said Sam, lifting him high in the air. "Time to go and see your Gran and Grandad." Russell wriggled, shouting,
"No! One car! Big car!"
He had seemed quite contented, but on seeing his parents, decided he would exert his authority again. It sometimes worked with Mummy, but Daddy was there as well. "No," said Sam. "We're going out now. You can have a ride later."
"No! Want a ride now!"
Russell's main present had been a pedal car, bright red, with shining mudguards, a horn and headlights, looking very much like his daddy's Ford Consul. He had driven up and down the front path, with Sam assisting him, as he could not quite manage the pedals as yet.
"Now be a good boy, please, Russell," said Val. "See, you can take your police car. And what about a few Smarties? Not too many, though. They'll spoil your dinner."
She knew it was bribery, but she didn't want a scene before they'd even set off. Russell nodded, and seemed quite happy to conform for the moment. They gathered together the small mountain of belongings they needed to take with them: bottles and baby food for Lucy, nappies and baby wipes and cream for Lucy, as Russell, to Val's relief, had dispensed with nappies at an early age, Lucy's carry-cot and blanket, and gifts for all the family. Finally they were ready, and they drove away to the home of Joshua and Beatrice Walker. It was only a mile or so distant, but too far to walk with all the paraphernalia. Sam parked the car in the spacious driveway, noting that his brother Jonathan's Ford Zephyr was already there. Sam carried Lucy in her carry-cot, and Russell held Val's hand as she rang the bell at the imposing oak door. The sound of the chimes echoed through the house, and in a moment the door was opened by Mrs. Porter, dressed as usual in black.
"Hello there, Valerie," she greeted her cheerily. "And little Russell too, though he's not so little now, are you, young man?"
The child looked quizzically at her.
"And here's Mr. Samuel and Lucy. A happy Christmas to you all."
Val had told Mrs. Porter soon after their first meeting that she must call her Val or Valerie, which was what the lady seemed to prefer. She knew she could never get used to being called Mrs. Sam, or Miss Horrocks as she was at that time. Mrs. Porter seemed to understand, although she kept strictly to protocol with the rest of the family. Mrs. Porter was a sort of housekeeper and cook to the Walker family, the only servant they had, apart from a cleaning woman and a part-time gardener. But she did not live at the house. She was a widow, now in her late 60s, and lived not far away with her brother, who was also widowed. She had worked for the Walker family for many years, her hours flexible to suit the requirements of Mrs. Walker. The days were long gone when mill owners, such as Joshua, would employ a host of servants, a living housekeeper, maybe a butler for the more affluent families, a cook and scullery maid, and at least one upstairs maid.
Beatrice, in fact, was quite capable of running a household on her own. She had been the eldest of several children in an ordinary working-class family, and had done her share of housework, cooking, and looking after her younger siblings. But she had a position in society now, as a mill-owner's wife, and a housekeeper was necessary to maintain the image she had of herself. Mrs. Porter usually came in the afternoon to prepare and cook the evening meal for Beatrice and Joshua. They dined early, around 6 o'clock, when he returned from the mill. Occasionally, if they were entertaining guests, she would stay later, free to go when she had stacked the dishwasher to be empty the next day. Most afternoons, Beatrice was occupied with what she thought of as her good works. She was chairman of the local townswomen's guild, an influential member of the church council, and served on the committees of several charitable organizations. Before she departed in a chauffeur-driven taxi from a local firm, Beatrice had never learnt to drive. She would discuss with Mrs. Porter such matters as menus for the week and the orders to be given to the various tradesmen who called, the butcher, fishmonger, baker and greengrocer. There was also a weekly order for household commodities from the local co-op. The exception to the rule was Sunday, when Mrs. Porter came in the morning to prepare and cook the midday meal. Always a roast, pork, lamb, or Joshua's favourite, roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, ready for when the Walkers returned from the morning service at church. They never missed this weekly ritual. Beatrice regarded it not just as a social, but a Christian duty, and as an example to set to others. Today was not only Sunday, but Christmas Day, and Mrs. Porter had been there for several hours in charge of the huge turkey. Although Joshua had put it in the oven at a very early hour, the roast potatoes, the vegetables and stuffing, and the Christmas pudding which she had made a few weeks ago, one of several in fact, because Beatrice liked to donate a large one for the church lunch, given for the needy of the parish, and one for Mrs. Porter to take home to be enjoyed by herself and her brother. Joshua and Beatrice were very generous employers. Mrs. Porter was well paid for her services, and Beatrice had learnt not to act the grand lady or patronize the woman, who was well aware of Beatrice's humble beginnings. Alice Porter was very satisfied with the status quo. Her wages paid for little extras for herself and her brother Cyril, and she and Beatrice got along quite well together, so long as Alice, with her tongue in her cheek, remembered her place. She ushered Sam and his family into the comfortable lounge where Beatrice was sitting, in pride of place, in the largest armchair near the fireplace. A coal fire blazed in the hearth, adding to the warmth and cheerfulness of the scene. Val, despite her misgivings, felt that it was a very pleasant and welcoming scene. Beatrice, as always, reminded her of the Queen Mother, sitting there regally, dressed in her favourite shade of lilac, an exquisite two-piece suit of the finest wool, with a necklace of amethysts around her plumpish neck. Val made a guess that this was a Christmas present from Joshua. She smiled graciously, as Val bent to kiss her cheek. "How lovely to see you, Valerie dear, and little Russell." She patted the little boy's ginger hair and pecked at his cheek. "Hello, Russell," she said without a great deal of enthusiasm. "Has Father Christmas been to your house?" He nodded unsurely, seeming tongue-tied. Val did not pressure him to give Grandma a kiss or to answer her question. Not sure what was going through his little mind, she wanted it to be a happy and peaceful day. And by and large it turned out to be so. They all greeted one another warmly, petty grievances and disagreements set aside on this day of goodwill to all mankind. There were 9 of them altogether, although only 8 sat down to dine around the Edwardian table in the dining room, as baby Lucy had already been fed and laid in her carry-cot near to Val. Russell sat in a high chair,
one that had been used years ago by Jonathan and Samuel. Rosemary, the 4-year-old daughter of Jonathan and Thelma, was able to sit at the table with a couple of cushions on the chair. The table was a picture of elegance, such as one might see in the pages of Ideal Home. The cutlery was heavy silver, a long-ago wedding present for Joshua and Beatrice. The cloth a heavy cream linen with a crocheted border, a family heirloom, with napkins to match in silver napkin rings. There were wine glasses of lead crystal, but the table mats added a more homely Dickensian touch, with scenes of coaches and horses, coaching inns, red-coated horsemen, and jolly Pickwickian characters. Beatrice had created the centrepiece, a silver bowl containing a red poinsettia surrounded by holly and ivy, and small chrysanthemums of yellow and white. This unfortunately had to be moved when Mrs. Porter brought in the vegetables in their Rockingham china dishes. The meal was the traditional Christmas fare, slices of white meat from the plump breast of the turkey, and a little of the brown meat from the huge legs of the bird. There was sage and onion stuffing. Beatrice had suggested chestnut stuffing, as this was thought to be the correct accompaniment to turkey, but she'd been overruled by Joshua, who preferred to stick to what he knew and liked. Crisp roast potatoes, a selection of vegetables including the traditional sprouts, not loved by all but a must at Christmas, followed by the Christmas pudding with brandy sauce. A mellow white wine was served with the meal, with orange juice for the children. Val tried to enjoy the delicious food as much as she could, with an eye all the time on Russell. His meal was in his own plastic bowl, so Beatrice's precious china was in no danger. She hoped he would not perform any of his naughty tricks, such as turning the bowl upside down when he thought he had eaten enough, or banging the spoon so that the gravy flew in all directions. He had been scolded time and again, but these were things he did when he wanted attention, especially if Val was occupied with Lucy. Fortunately, he behaved impeccably. Val could see Beatrice watching him from the other end of the table, but he seemed unaware of anything but the tasty meal he was clearly enjoying. He managed very well with his spoon and pusher, preferring to do it by himself rather than being helped. He was an independent child for much of the time, until he decided that he wanted to be noticed. He created a laugh all round when he finished his dinner, giving a contented little sigh and shouting, "All gone!" as he sometimes did at home. Val at that moment felt a surge of love for him. They pulled crackers and wore the paper hats, all except Beatrice, who did not want to spoil her hairdo, read out the silly jokes, then sat back full of bonhomie after a very satisfying meal. Thelma spoke to Mrs. Porter as she cleared away the dishes.
"That was a wonderful meal, Mrs. Porter. Thank you very much."
She glanced across at Beatrice, lest she should be thought to be speaking out of turn.
"Val and I will sort out the kitchen and make the tea and coffee, won't we, Val? Then perhaps Mrs. Porter could go home?"
Val voiced her agreement, as Thelma looked across at her mother-in-law.
"Is that all right with you, Mother?" she asked.
Val knew that Thelma, like herself, had difficulty in calling Beatrice mother or mum. Val avoided the issue by not using any name at all except Grandma, which was acceptable now they had the children.
"Yes, thank you, Thelma and Valerie,"
said Beatrice, looking a little put out that she had not been the first one to say thank you to the woman who had done all the work, but she did so now.
"Thank you very much, Mrs. Porter. That was an excellent meal. You go off home now and enjoy the rest of the day with your brother."
The lady was pleased to be dismissed, and thanked the two young women for offering to step in and attend to the rest of the chores. Thelma laughed. It's nice to escape for a little while, isn't it, Val? Yes, it sure is. A bit of peace and quiet.
Well, I'm really grateful, said Mrs. Porter. Just stack the pots in the dishwasher. They won't be used again for a while, but be careful with me lady's best china. Sorry, I'm forgetting my place, aren't I?
They all laughed. Thelma and Val had come to regard Alice Porter as almost one of the family. Nothing was ever said, but the two of them knew that the woman was well aware of their mother-in-law's pretensions, just as they were. When she had first met Thelma, Val had imagined that she might be aloof and self-restrained. She had reminded Val of a snow princess in a fairy tale. She was tall and slender, with finely drawn features and pale blonde hair, in an immaculate page-boy style. But as she became more acquainted with her, she realized that her looks belied her personality. Thelma was warm and friendly, with a sense of humour, which Val guessed was necessary with her rather straight-laced husband. Thelma had taken Val under her wing, knowing that she had a family background that Beatrice considered far inferior to that of the Walkers. Moreover, she was one of their employees. Thelma, on the other hand, had met with full approval because her father was a solicitor. But Val had proved herself to be worthy of a place in the Walker family. Even Jonathan now recognized that she was an admirable wife for his brother. The girls busied themselves in the kitchen when Mrs. Porter had gone, carefully stacking the dishwasher with the precious china, then making pots of both tea and coffee to end the meal, a northern custom that Joshua insisted upon. They poured out and handed round the beverages. Then it was time for the ritual of giving out the Christmas presents. They were in a huge pile beneath the Christmas tree, large ones and small ones, all wrapped in gaily patterned paper and ribbon and gift tags. Lucy, after a short nap, was sitting on Val's knee, looking bright and alert, as though she knew what was going on. Russell, quiet for once, was leaning against his daddy's knees. Val was pleased he was behaving so well, and hoped against hope that this would continue. She was more relaxed now, and the tension she always felt on meeting Beatrice had receded.
Rosemary, dear, would you like to hand out all these nice Christmas presents? Beatrice said now to the little girl, whom Val guessed was her favourite grandchild. She was an angelic-looking child, with pale blonde hair and delicate features like her mother. She was dressed in a dark red velvet frock with ribbons in her hair. She smiled and nodded, looking delighted at the idea. Both she and Russell had been eyeing the presents with interest.
I'll read the names on the labels, and then you can take them round, said Thelma. Now, let's see. This one says, To Russell, with love from Grandma and Grandpa.
Russell actually remembered to say thank you and started to tear off the paper at once.
I think we'd better wait till Rosemary has given them all out, said Val. Then we can all open them together. Okay, Russell?
He started to scowl, then thought better of it as he watched what was happening. Presents for everybody, and there might be some more for him.
Okay, he said.
The children had received their main family presents in the morning, the ones that Father Christmas had brought. Although they had been told that Mummy and Daddy had had a part in it as well, lest they should grow up believing that the magic man in red would bring everything they wished for without question. These gifts were from family members to one another, to John and Thelma from Sam and Val, and vice versa, to Mum and Dad from Sam and Val, and so on. There were presents from great-grandparents and aunts and uncles who were not there, but who liked to remember the children at Christmas. And when Rosemary had finished her task, the unwrapping began. Soon the carpet was littered with the discarded paper, ribbons, tinsel, and gift cards. The gifts had been so carefully wrapped and were now torn apart by the children's eager little hands. The adults, though, were slightly more patient and thanked one another delightedly for the cashmere jumpers and pullovers, leather gloves, boxes of exclusive chocolates that one only bought at Christmas time, perfume, and boxes containing special beauty products. The children received sensible presents of jumpers, dresses, and woolly hats. But there were more interesting things as well: jigsaw puzzles, games, building bricks, colouring books, and crayons. Russell and Rosemary were wildly excited, and Lucy stared at it all in wonder. When Russell started a game of screwing up the paper and throwing it around, encouraging Rosemary to do the same, Val and Thelma decided it was time to put an end to the merriment. They gathered up all the debris and took it away. The two children were persuaded to play nicely and quietly with the jigsaw puzzle, while the adults enjoyed a glass of sherry and listened to the Queen's speech. Fortunately, peace reigned while Her Majesty was speaking, but came to an end when Russell started to snatch at the pieces and shove them in the wrong places, much to Rosemary's annoyance.
"He's spoiling it," she shouted. "He can't do it. He's too little." "Can do, he retorted, and Val intervened just as he was about to punch his cousin. "Don't be cross with him, Rosemary," said Thelma. "He's only 2 and you're 4.5, aren't you? Put the jigsaw away now, and you can do it another time." Russell was red in the face and scowling. Val knew that he was also quite tired, as he had been up since the crack of dawn. She looked appealingly at Sam, and he read her thoughts. "Well, folks," said Sam, "sorry to break up the party, but I think it's time we were heading back home." "Oh, surely not so soon," said Beatrice. "You haven't been here all that long." But Sam knew from the glances she kept levelling at Russell that she would not really be sorry to see them depart. "Long enough, Mother," he said, then realised that his remark was rather tactless. "I mean, I did say that we wouldn't stay for tea. Lucy will be very tired by then, and this little man," he patted Russell's head, "is getting tired as well. And that's when he starts to get a little bit difficult." Beatrice nodded. "Just as you say, dear, but it's been lovely to see you all." There was a good deal of commotion then, as coats were put on, all the presents gathered up and put in a big carrier bag, and there were hugs and kisses and promises to see you soon. "Give Gran a kiss," said Val to Russell. He looked a little unsure, but dutifully pecked at her cheek. Beatrice put an arm round him, just for a moment. "You've been a good boy for most of the time," she said. Joshua picked him up and lifted him high in the air. "He's a grand little fella, aren't you, Russell? You've got a lovely little family there," he said as he put the child down and kissed Val's cheek. "Well done, Valerie, my dear." Eventually all the goodbyes had been said, and they were in the car and ready for off. Val let out a deep sigh. "Thank goodness that's over." "Why, it wasn't too bad," said Sam. "No temper tantrums and no fisticuffs. I thought he did rather well. He's getting better. I'm sure he is." "He's scared stiff of your mother, and who can blame him?" said Val. Sam thought it best not to answer. Lucy was ready for a sleep when they arrived home, but Russell had recovered from his tiredness. He raced around, waving his arms and whooping loudly. Val knew he was glad to be home, in an environment where he could be himself. He had exercised restraint for long enough.
she managed to quieten him with a jigsaw puzzle that was easier than the one he had attempted with Rosemary. It featured his favourite things: cars and buses and a big red fire engine. "I'll ring Janice now," she said, as peace was temporarily restored. "I'll thank her for the children's presents, wish them a happy Christmas, and see how my little goddaughter's getting on. Keep an eye on Russell, won't you, Sam?" Sam, ensconced in an easy chair and almost asleep, opened one eye and nodded. Chapter 8. "That was Val on the phone," said Janice, late on the afternoon of Christmas Day, "thanking us for the children's presents. So I thanked her for Sarah's, of course. They've been to Sam's parents for dinner. Quite an ordeal, I should imagine. I'm glad I haven't got a mother-in-law like Beatrice. I really look forward to seeing your parents, Phil. They've always been so easy to get along with, and they make Ian welcome as well." "Yes, they're a pretty easy-going couple," agreed Phil. "Make the most of your relaxing day tomorrow, love. Mum and Dad will insist on doing everything themselves. You'll be busy with your dad and Norma the following day. But I'll do most of the cooking like I promised. And Ian will want to show off his new skills. I've told him to invite Sophie for tea on Tuesday, when Dad and Norma are here. They haven't met her yet. Not that there's anything serious between Ian and Sophie, but they seem to get along well together. They won't have seen one another for 2 whole days, and it seems ages when you're young, doesn't it?" "Oh, I don't know so much," said Phil. "They're coping with their separation pretty well. Ian's enjoying his course, and there seems to be a lot going on at Sophie's college. It remains to be seen if their friendship will stand the test of time. These teenage romances don't always survive." "Ours did," said Janice. "Or perhaps I should say that mine did. You were my first real boyfriend, although I don't know what you'd been up to before we met." "Not a great deal," said Phil with a laugh. "And I've certainly no cause to complain now." He gave her a quick hug and a kiss. "What are we having for tea?" "Tea?" Janice stared at him. "Do you really think we need any tea after that enormous meal?" "Well, a late tea, or perhaps an early supper. Ian will no doubt be hungry again when he gets back." Ian, after dutifully listening to the Queen's speech, had gone out for a long walk to get some fresh air and burn off the excess pounds gained with eating 2 helpings of Christmas pudding. "OK, we'll get Sarah bathed and into bed first, and then turkey sandwiches, I suppose, and I'll cut the Christmas cake. Then it'll be telly, won't it? The usual variety show. Who's on this year?" The scene was similar to thousands of others throughout the country. Some family gatherings would be considerably larger, sometimes leading to frayed tempers and squabbles, as the host and hostess tried, often unsuccessfully, to please everybody. Sissy's and Walter's families, the Fosters and the Clarksons, had been friends for a considerable time, and they always spent Christmas Day together. 1 year at the Fosters' home, and the following year at the Clarksons'. This year it was the turn of the Clarksons. The men, Joseph Foster and Archie Clarkson, had worked together at a woolen mill for many years. Not Walker's mill, but another one at the other side of the town. Their wives had worked for a while as weavers, but were now glad to stay at home and be housewives. The men also were sidesmen and keen workers at their local church. Their wives, Hannah and Millie, had therefore struck up a friendship, a somewhat cautious one, however, for Hannah Foster could not entirely conceal her envy of Millie. Both sets of parents, though, had always hoped for a marriage between Sissy and Walter, their only children, and this had taken place 5 years ago, in 1955. Now there were 2 grandchildren, and it was a source of quiet amusement to Sissy and Walter as they watched their parents, especially the mothers, and more especially Hannah Foster, competing with one another over the gifts they bought for their grandchildren, Paul and Holly.
"Come along now, you two,"
said Sissy when it was nearing 12 o'clock on Christmas Day.
"It's time we were getting ready to go and see Grandma and Grandad." "Which ones?"
asked Holly, stopping for a moment as she wheeled her new doll's pram up and down the hallway.
"Grandma Millie,"
answered Sissy, and she was not really surprised to hear Holly exclaim,
"Goody!"
She suppressed a smile. It did not worry her that Walter's mother was the favourite granny. She knew that her own mother loved both children very much, but Millie was far more easygoing and relaxed in her relationship with the children, something they must have noticed, albeit unconsciously. Sissy and her mother had never got along together all that well, although there had been an improvement in their relationship since the arrival of the children. Paul had just come in from the garden, where he had been riding his new tricycle up and down the path.
"Daddy's getting the car out," he said, "and he's putting my bike away in a special place in the garage." "Can I take my pram to Gran's?"
asked Holly.
"No, there won't be room in the car," said Sissy, "but you can take your new dolly. Put a nice new coat on, then she'll be warm."
It was Holly's 3rd birthday, as well as being Christmas Day, so she had received either 2 gifts or one more special one from relations and friends. She didn't seem to mind. She had been told that she was special because she shared her birthday with baby Jesus. She had heard a lot about him recently, as she'd learnt the words and sang along with Paul as he practised Away in a Manger and Little Jesus Sweetly Sleep for his nativity play.
"Can I take my table decoration to Gran's?" asked Paul. "We're not having our dinner here, are we?"
"Oh, yes, she'll love that," said Sissy. "But we must remember to bring it back. Then we can put it on our own table tomorrow. Now, let's find the presents we're taking for Grandma and Grandad, and Nana and Grandpa as well."
Officially, Hannah was Nana and Millie was Grandma, but the names often got confused and shortened to Gran. They packed all their belongings in the boot of the car. Then Walter drove the short distance, a mile or so, to his parents' home. It was a semi-detached house, quite a modest one, with small gardens to the front and rear. This was a bone of contention, however, to Hannah Foster, as their home was a terraced house in a row of others just like it, opening straight onto the street. Both families, though, did own their own properties. The Clarksons also owned a car, whereas the Fosters did not. Joseph had not learnt to drive, and had never been interested in doing so, as he lived close to his place of work. It peeved Hannah that they had to accept lifts from their friends, although they never refused to do so, and they usually spent the annual summer holiday together, using the Clarksons' car. Sissy's parents had already arrived, and Hannah was seated in the best armchair by the fire. The 2 men were chatting amiably, and Millie was busy in the kitchen. She appeared when she heard their voices, wiping her hands on the large white apron she was wearing to cover her best frock. She bent down to hug and kiss Holly first of all.
"Happy birthday, Holly, and happy Christmas as well. Isn't it exciting?"
She also embraced Paul.
"Happy Christmas, love. My goodness, aren't you growing? You'll be as tall as your daddy before long."
"Grandma, I've brought something special," he said. "It's a table decoration. We made them at school, and it's to stand in the middle of the table when we have our dinner. Would you like it?"
He carefully removed it from its bag and handed it to his Gran.
"Well, isn't that lovely?"
she exclaimed, taking hold of the Father Christmas, a washing-up liquid bottle wearing a red crepe paper coat and hat, with eyes, nose and mouth drawn on a cardboard face, rosy red cheeks, and a cotton wool beard.
"Have you made it all by yourself?"
"Well, most of it. The teacher helped a bit. We all made one."
"Look, Nana."
Milly held up the figure to show to Hannah.
"Isn't he lovely? He'll match my red tablecloth."
"Very nice," said Hannah briefly. "Aren't you going to come and give Nana a kiss, Paul?"
He dutifully did so, and so did Holly. As if he was aware of a slight tension in the air, Paul said,
"We only made one, Nana, and Grandma can't keep it. She can use it today, then we're taking it home to put on our own table tomorrow, aren't we, Mummy?"
"Yes, that's right, love," said Sissy.
"Hello, Mum. Happy Christmas."
There were greetings all round. Then coats were removed, and room was made in the small lounge for the newcomers. There were 2 downstairs rooms and a small kitchen. The front room, the lounge or sitting room, was kept for best and only used on special occasions. The larger back room was the dining and living room, which was used most of the time. Today a coal fire burned in the cream and green tiled fireplace in the lounge. A few paper streamers showed that it was Christmas, and the small artificial tree that Walter remembered from his boyhood stood in the window, with the same fairy on the top.
"Do you need any help, Milly?"
asked Sissy. Her mother-in-law had said she should call her Milly, and Sissy had got used to doing so. Hannah had felt obliged to ask Walter to use her Christian name, something that would have been considered outrageous a generation ago.
"No, thank you, dear," said Milly in answer to the question. "I'm managing all right, but it's nice of you to ask. Perhaps you could help to set the table in a little while, you and Hannah."
Hannah sniffed. She was supposed to be a guest today. She gave a faint smile.
"Yes, I don't mind helping if you're busy."
Paul pulled at his mum's arm.
"What about the presents, Mummy? Shall I hand them out now?"
"Perhaps we should wait till we've had our dinner, Paul," said Milly. "I'm rather busy at the moment. I'm just going to see how the turkey's cooking, and then have to see to the potatoes and vegetables. So, shall we wait till later? We've got some nice presents for you as well."
"That's a good idea. It'll be something else to look forward to," said Sissy, "after we've enjoyed Grandma's nice dinner. You can play with your Lego now, and Holly's brought her new dolly."
The 2 men were still chatting, and Walter went to join them on the settee. They started to talk shop about the conditions in their respective mills.
"Come on, Mum," said Sissy after a little while. "Let's help Milly with the table."
The folding table was extended to its full size to seat 8 of them, and Sissy fetched extra chairs from upstairs to make the full number.
"The tablecloth and cutlery are in the sideboard drawer," said Milly, coming in from the kitchen looking hot and flustered. "You know where they are, don't you, Sissy? And the wine glasses are in the little cupboard at the top. They might need a wash. We haven't used them for ages. And you can use 2 bigger glasses for the children's orange juice. The table mats are in the bottom drawer. And here's the special serviettes I've bought. I'll leave you to see to it then. I've just the gravy to make, and I'll get Archie to carve the turkey."
"I'll go and tell him,"
said Sissy, making for the lounge. She returned with her father-in-law and Paul, proudly holding his table decoration.
"Just wait a bit, love, while we set the table," said Sissy. "Then you can put it in the middle."
Hannah gave her usual sniff and slight shrug, as if to infer that it was all rather disorganized. Sissy ignored her, as she opened the drawers to get the cloth, table mats and cutlery. The tablecloth, used only at Christmas time, had a gay design of holly and red poinsettias. The knives, forks and spoons were in daily use, and Cissy chose the ones that looked the most presentable. The table mats featured brightly coloured flowers, a different design for each mat. Cissy placed a paper serviette at the side of each fork. These had been bought with the children in mind, with pictures of Santas and snowmen on them. Nothing matched, but it all looked very bright and cheerful.
"Now, Paul, let's have your Father Christmas," said Cissy. "Put him there, right in the middle. Look, Nana, doesn't that look smashing?"
Hannah agreed readily for once that it was
just the job.
She really did think the world of her grandson.
"All shipshape here now, Mum," said Cissy. "You go back to the lounge, and I'll see if Millie wants any more help."
There was, in fact, scarcely room for them all in the small kitchen. Archie was carving the huge turkey, and Millie was making a final check on the potatoes and vegetables.
"I'm going to put it all straight onto the plates," she said. "I know it's more correct-like to put the veg in dishes to help yourself, but I always think it goes cold. They can come back for more. Put the stuffing and the apple sauce on the table, though, Cissy. Not everybody likes them. Then you can put out the dinner for the little uns. You know how much they can eat."
When all the meals had been dished out onto the plates, Millie took off her apron and wiped her hot face.
"Would you go and tell them it's ready, Cissy, love?" she said.
They all came into the dining room. Cissy put 2 cushions on Holly's chair so that she could reach the table. Paul was able to manage with 1 cushion, and they were both reasonably competent with a knife and fork, Paul having learnt the skill at school dinners. Holly tried determinedly to copy him, as she did with most things, not wanting to be left behind. But Cissy sat next to her to help when she struggled a little. Millie was wearing a woolen dress in a delicate shade of lavender, which toned well with the purplish rinse she had on her greying hair. She was a plumpish woman, but well corseted. She always tried, with success, to make the most of her appearance.
"New dress, Millie?" asked Cissy. "It suits you. That colour's just right for you."
"Thank you, dear," said Millie, looking pleased. "Yes, it's a Christmas present from Archie. I chose it myself, of course, but he chose this brooch. That was a lovely surprise."
The floral brooch with shiny mauve stones and seed pearls glittered on the lapel. Cissy noticed her own mother looking a little put out at the compliment to Millie. She could not pay a similar compliment to Hannah, as she was wearing the paisley-patterned dress that she had worn last Christmas. The 2 women were not at all alike in looks. Hannah was thin but large-boned, with angular features, and did not bother to "tart up," as she called it, her iron-grey hair with a coloured rinse. She had a perm about 3 times a year, and it was obvious from the tight curls that she had recently visited the hairdresser. Cissy searched around in her mind for something to say to her mother.
"What has Dad bought for you, Mum?"
she asked after a moment's hesitation. She knew that her father was always generous with his birthday and Christmas gifts. He did not dare to be otherwise.
"Oh, I've got a new coat," said Hannah,
preening herself a little.
"We got it from C&A, but it's from their more exclusive range. It's a heather mixture tweed with a fur collar." "And very nice it is too," said Millie. "It suits you, Hannah."
Hannah gave a satisfied nod, seemingly mollified now. The 2 older men and Walter were tucking into their meal, enjoying the food, and taking little heed of the conversation between the women. Archie Clarkson and Joe Foster were not dissimilar in looks, both with grey hair, now receding, and a bald patch on top. Both were of a hefty build, though not overweight, and both of them wore spectacles. They were similarly dressed, too, in V-neck pullovers that had been Christmas presents from their wives. "Smashing meal, Millie," observed Joe. "These roast potatoes are just the way I like 'em, all crisp and brown and soft inside. Mind you, Hannah can do a nice roast potato and all, can't you, love?" he added, looking anxiously at his wife. Hannah nodded briefly.
"This sage and onion stuffing is delicious, Millie," she said. "Have you made it yourself?"
she asked, knowing very well that Millie had done no such thing.
"Good gracious, no, of course not," replied Millie. "It's good old Paxo. You can't beat it, even though it's out of a packet. But I must admit it's tasty."
She looked across the table at her grandchildren.
"They seem to be enjoying their dinner, bless 'em, and aren't they managing well on their own?"
"Holly needs a bit of help,"
said Cissy, cutting the child's turkey into small pieces.
"Paul learnt to use a knife and fork at school dinners, and Holly's doing her best, aren't you, love?"
The little girl nodded.
"And I'm going to school soon, like Paul. Not the same school, though. The one where my friend Kelly goes."
Millie looked surprised.
"Well, now, fancy that."
"First I've heard of it," muttered Hannah.
"She's only 3, our Sissy. They don't start school till they're 4, and that's too soon, in my opinion."
Sissy held back a sharp retort and took a deep breath.
"It's not really school, but Holly likes to think it is," she added quietly. "It's a play group for younger children. They take them at 2.5 if they're ready, so Holly's quite old enough. Like she said, her friend Kelly goes. Her mother Megan is a friend of mine, so we'll be able to go together. It's on the way to Paul's school, so it's very handy."
"Oh, that's nice," said Millie. "You'll feel lost with both of 'em gone, though, won't you?"
"Yes, I know. The house felt really strange when Paul first went to school, and I know I shall miss Holly and all, though the playgroup's only in the mornings."
She decided to take the bull by the horns and be damned to the reaction.
"I'm thinking I might get a part-time job while they're both out in the mornings. Like I said, the house'll feel empty and it'll be summat for me to do."
"What?" exclaimed Hannah. "Haven't you got enough to do looking after your home?"
She nodded knowingly.
"Aye, I thought you'd get fed up with housework sooner or later, but it's what we have to do when we get wed."
Cissy was surprised when Walter made a comment. He was looking at her, and she was pleased to see his almost imperceptible wink and half smile.
"Sissy's a jolly good mother and wife, Hannah," he said. "None better. And I'm not going to complain so long as she's there to see to the kiddies. And I know she will be. Anyway, it could only be for a few hours a day."
Hannah gave her usual sniff, but made no comment.
"Well, if that's what you want to do, dear, then I don't see why not," said Millie a little cagily. "It would give you a bit of pocket money for yourself. I know money doesn't go far when you've got 2 children. They grow out of everything so fast, don't they?" "Walter's got a good job, though, hasn't he?" said Hannah. "He's been promoted."
"Nothing's sure these days, Hannah," said Walter. "Dad and me and Joe were just talking about the mills."
"You wouldn't want to go back to the mill, dear, would you?" asked Millie. "I know you were very clever with all that mending you did, but I'm sure it must have got a bit monotonous and very hard work, too."
"No, I wouldn't, Millie. But I couldn't anyway. Walter says they're not taking any new staff on just now, and they're not replacing folk when they leave, are they, Walter?"
"That's true, and it's the same where Dad and Joe work."
Aye, it's all this newfangled stuff from America. That's where it's come from, said Joe. Nylon and terylene and crimpline and all that sort of stuff. Synthetic fibres, they call them. There's not as much call for wool now, and the orders aren't coming in as they used to. It's the same at Walker's, isn't it, Walter? Yes, I'm afraid it is. The bosses have been talking about where they can make cuts.
But your job's safe, isn't it, Walter? Asked his mother.
I hope so, he replied with a wry grin. Anyway, let's change the subject. What about your Christmas pud now, Mum? I think we've all finished.
The three women cleared away the plates, Hannah a little condescendingly, but aware that it might look bad if she didn't help.
Thank you, Hannah, said Milly. A little help is worth a lot of pity, as my mother used to say, God bless her. Sissy'll help me to dish out the puds, won't you, love? A smaller portion for Holly, but I expect Paul can manage as much as us, can't he? You bet he can. He loves his puddings, rum sauce and all. It smells real good, Milly. And they're actually homemade, the pudding and the sauce, said Milly with a sly grin. Not like the stuffing, eh?
Hannah was now safely back in the lounge.
Take no notice of her, said Sissy. She always has to stick her oar in. She's enjoying it, though, I know she is. She cleaned her plate, didn't she?
Oh, I know your mother only too well, said Milly. We're the best of friends, you know. I suppose we all have our funny little ways. Now, let's take these puddings in.
The puddings, well laced with rum and the rum sauce to add more flavour, were well received by everyone.
Delicious, Milly, said Hannah,
and there was no doubt that she meant it. The rum and the small amount of wine she had had with the meal had put her in a more mellow frame of mind. Sissy exchanged a knowing glance with Milly as she answered,
I'm so pleased you enjoyed it, Hannah.
She couldn't resist adding,
It's homemade.
The only problem now is the washing up, said Archie. We'll have to get one of them dishwashers, Milly.
Nonsense, exclaimed his wife. I've never been worried about a few pots. Let's stack 'em up and forget 'em for now. They'll keep till later. Come on, let's get on with the exciting part, shall we? The presents. Are you ready, Paul and Holly?
The children, with Sissy helping, handed round the gifts. It was always difficult to buy for the men, but Archie and Joe seemed well pleased with the lamb's wool scarves, the always useful socks, and large boxes of their favourite sweets, licorice all sorts. Hannah and Milly enthused over the gift boxes of toiletries, soaps, talc and bath oil, perfumed with gardenia fragrance for Milly, and lavender for Hannah. Luxuries they would not buy for themselves. Both mothers were treated exactly the same. Sissy was not surprised to receive useful presents from her mother, who never ceased to remind her that she was a housewife. A cookery book and apron and oven gloves, although they did have a pretty design of butterflies, and, more acceptable, a large box of milk tray chocolates. Milly had chosen a very attractive manicure set, with hand cream and a set of small bottles of nail varnish. Sissy thanked them both profusely, not giving the slightest hint as to which present was the more popular. The two grandmothers had conferred together about what to buy for the children, and of course it was Holly's birthday, so she had to have extra presents. They had gone on a shopping expedition together, ending up at their favourite store, Marks and Spencer. They had each chosen a pretty dress for Holly with matching cardigans. Then Milly had chosen fancy socks and underwear, and Hannah a bright woolen hat and gloves, making sure that she spent just as much as her friend. Milly bought a duffel coat for Paul, a bright blue one to wear when he was not in school uniform, and Hannah bought him check trousers and a blue jumper.
There were fun presents as well, colouring books and crayons, a book with clothes to cut out and fit on a cardboard doll, games of Snap and Happy Families, Ladybird books, and boxes of Jelly Babies and Smarties. Paul and Holly were delighted with their gifts, but were ready to go home. They had kept quiet long enough while the grown-ups listened to the Queen and then had a cup of tea and a slice of Christmas cake. "Thank goodness that's over for another year," said Cissy when they had arrived home and settled down. "No, I suppose I don't really mean that, do I? Your mum makes us so welcome, and it's nice for us all to get together, I suppose." "And next year it will be your mother's turn," Walter reminded her. "Perish the thought. Let's enjoy the rest of the day, shall we? Your mum's given me some turkey to make sandwiches, and there's Holly's birthday cake, complete with 3 candles." Walter gave her a hug and kiss. "Thanks, Sissy, love," he said. "Why, what for?" she asked. "Well, for everything. I sometimes forget to say it like I should. Happy Christmas, love." Chapter 9. During the second week in the new year, Janice and Phil had an unexpected visit from their next-door neighbour. Isabel Tarrant owned the florist's shop adjoining their property, aptly named Bella's Blossoms. The lady was usually known as Bella to her friends. Janice answered the knock at the door. At just turned 7 o'clock, pleasantly surprised to see her. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said. "I know you're usually very busy, but I have some news to share with you." "No, we're not busy at the moment," said Janice. "Sarah's bathed and in bed, and Phil has no party in tonight. The evening bookings have dropped off a bit since the new year, so it's nice to have some time to ourselves. Come on up, Bella." Janice took their visitor into the living room, where Phil was reading the evening paper. He too was pleased to see Bella. She was a good neighbour, busy during the day, but willing to babysit on the odd occasions when they went out. Janice brought flowers from her shop to add a touch of colour and brightness to the cafe. "A glass of sherry, Bella?" asked Phil, always an agreeable host. "Yes, that would be lovely," she replied. "Thank you." She looked a little anxious as she sat down in an armchair. "Not bad news, I hope," said Janice when they were all seated. Bella took a little sip of her sherry. "This is delicious. I don't often indulge myself with treats like this. No, not bad news," she went on. "I suppose it's good news in a way, but I must admit that it took me a long time to make up my mind." They both looked at her inquiringly. "I'm moving," she said. "I've decided to sell the shop and go and live with my sister. She's been urging me to do it for quite a while, but I was very undecided." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," said Janice. "We'll both be sorry, won't we, Phil?" Bella had become a friend as well as a neighbour. "We certainly will," said Phil, "but you have to do what is right for you. And you've really made up your mind, have you?" "Well, yes. I shall be 65 my next birthday, retiring age, although I know I could stay on longer if I wished. I really enjoy working in the shop. It's been a real godsend to me since my husband died. That's 8 years ago now. We were married quite late on in life, you know. I'd turned 40, and James was rather older. We never had any children, but we were so happy together. It helped me to come to terms with losing him to a certain extent, with having the shop to run. But it's getting harder. especially on these winter mornings.
Where does your sister live? Asked Janice. Will you be moving far away?
No, not all that far. Dorothy lives in Thirsk. Well, on the outskirts of the town. It's a lovely market town, and she's in a very nice part of the countryside. She's a widow too, has been for about 5 years. They were married a long time, her and Bill. They had 2 children, and she's got grandchildren, of course, but they don't live anywhere nearby. She keeps busy with her WI meetings and her church, and she's got friends, but she says it's not the same as family. We've always got on well together, Dorothy and me. She's 2 years younger, and there were only the 2 of us.
Bella stopped speaking, looking pensive and a little unsure.
It's a big step to take, giving up your home and your livelihood, said Phil. But I'm sure you've considered all that, haven't you?
And you feel you would be happy living with your sister? Asked Janice. Yes, replied Bella. I've thought about all the pros and cons. I know I'll be giving up my home, but Dorothy's house is far too big for her now. She's never wanted to move, though, since Bill died. I suppose all the memories are there. I'm sure I'll be happy there. She says I can have my own rooms, bedroom, of course, and a living room to myself, for when I want to be on my own. But I expect we'll have our meals together and sit together in the evenings. We'll have to see how it works out, won't we?
End of CD 3.